Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Bowie City Council meeting. As we start, I'd like to ask everybody that can to stand as we start every meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we have a busy agenda tonight, so when we get to the point of hearing from the public, when we get to the point of hearing from the public, I will call up the speaker and then notify the person next in line so that we can try to keep it moving. What I would ask is that if you have a comment that mirrors somebody else, ditto or something like that is a fine example too, okay? Before we agenda additions, deletions, Council, if you don't object, I'm going to move the maglev discussion from item B, new business, move that up front because we've got so many people here to do that. And then I'd like to, with your concurrence, add a new item under new business, a discussion about relief funding for our friends in Texas. Okay. All right. Do we have anybody signed up for citizen participation? When I call your name, if you would come to the podium and identify yourself for the folks at home. First speaker is Jason Peralt, and be followed by Lillian Weatherton. Are either or both of those here? Oh, good to see you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Sorry for those of you who are in here for the train. This is not about the train. Thank you for allowing me the forum to voice both my family's concerns and the concerns of other residents at the Bowen. The Bowen is a property here in Bowie managed by the Bizzuto Group and owned by Berman Enterprises, located at 14909 Health Center Drive. Over the past few months, there has been a significant rise in crime in our community and a growing concern of infestations in many of the wings of the building. Our personal story began in December of last year when we were personally affected by a roach infestation and our property team could not handle it. Within 2 months, we had to move ourselves to a new apartment without any assistance. When we moved into our new apartment, we were without a deadbolt, a security system for weeks, and it was during this time our apartment was first broken into. We have filed the appropriate police reports and the officer confirmed forced entry. We live one door down from the mailroom entrance, which is a central access point for all the residents. We were in plain sight when the break-in occurred during business hours as my wife and I were away attending classes at the University of Maryland. The matter was brought to the attention of the front office staff, property manager Tika Scott, who did nothing other than acknowledge our problem. We persisted over the next few weeks about having more security cameras installed, which was eventually escalated to the regional manager, Danelle Cheeks, who promised us cameras. Weeks more passed with no cameras in the residence halls, but they made the effort to put them in the clubhouse. Between March and July, the front office had been broken into, televisions stolen, and the staff in the front office had pictures of the suspects. They had a hunch they were friends of a resident, but were told no arrests or summons were issued. In July, our guests, who both work for the Orioles organization, were visiting and both of their cars had been broken into. Both cars had the correct passes and one even had the extra $50 a month guest parking pass. Their cars sustained broken windows and more than $3,000 in items stolen from their cars. These crime issues are common at our residence and you'll often find personal security cameras as well as exterior lock boxes for added security outside of residents' doorways. We spoke to Detective Wood, who said those particular suspects were also suspects in a violent crime a few nights later. Residents at the Bowen don't feel safe in their own homes, and this is unacceptable considering the price they charge for residents. In addition to security concerns, the staff, ownership, and management companies foster an environment that prides itself on blissful ignorance and act only when there is a benefit to them. They seem to pretend they don't know what is going on when they indeed do and have been notified on multiple occasions. We have not had a working fireplace since April. We went 6 weeks without a dryer, and instead of bringing new parts, they just shuffled us between vacant units. We pay a premium price for things that we aren't afforded. Our alarm had to be fixed more than 5 times, and it wasn't until August 4th that our alarm was finally fixed by the corporate maintenance team. We addressed, I got one paragraph left, sir. We addressed these concerns numerous times, countless times, with the front office to no avail. It wasn't until we reached a vice president, Jolyn Scotch, who reached out to us from her personal cell phone with our concerns. During the time, the police created flyers with suspects' photos, and we dispersed them among the community, only to have the property manager herself take them down. She was on vacation at the time as well. Life has been a challenge at the Bowen, and for the prices that are charged, I pay almost $2,300 a month for my apartment. It's quite frankly, it's disgusting that they're even allowed to run a residence here. My housing comes from the GI Bill furnished by the VA, as I'm a veteran. I come before you tonight to ask for your help to do whatever in your power to keep the citizens of Bowie safe. Berman Enterprises and Bizzuto Management have taken a laissez-faire attitude and have resorted to treating their residents as transactional. To have our property or associated property broken into 3 times in the last 5 months is unacceptable. And I'm asking that you hold Berman, Bizzuto, and its affiliates responsible for taking a hands-off stance when it comes to resident safety. We have a petition on change.org, and if you search Bizzuto, B-O-Z-Z-U-T-O, you will find our personal narrative with more than a few dozen supporters, many of them residents. Please help us change the environment at the property and protect the residents, their families, and their assets. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We will follow up with that with local
Thank you,
PC.
Mayor.
Lillian Weatherington? Good evening, ma'am. Welcome. All these people came out to hear you.
I don't think that's true.
You might want to raise that microphone up a little bit.
My name is Lillian Weatherington, and I too am a resident at the Bowen at 14999 Health Center Drive in Bowie, Maryland. That was my handsome husband back there. My husband Jason also just spoke. I came forward today with the intent to inform the city about my experiences while living at the Bowen community. In addition to our 3 break-ins, lack of fully functioning apartment, we have also experienced what we perceive as neglectful behavior to other living beings. Over the summer, in near 100-degree weather, both my husband and I personally reached out to the front office in regards to several dogs being left out on apartment balconies by themselves for hours at a time. On at least 3 separate occasions, a dog was left outside, whining, panting, and barking for hours when the real feel was well over 110 Fahrenheit. After attempting to contact the front office during every incident, we ended up calling the Prince George's Animal Control. On one instance, Father's Day of this year, we were outside on our patio FaceTiming my family when a little dog, a Yorkie, fell from the sky. Our reasoning, due to knowing most of our neighbors, pointed to this dog having fallen from the 4th floor. We scooped the dog up, returned him home to his owner, and promptly informed the front office. The assistant leasing director never informed the property manager, Tika. The next day, when we informed the front office agents of this, Charlotte and Ricardo, Charlotte laughed and said she was glad that we did not call the police because, I quote, "just imagine the mess that would have caused." In our time at the Bowen, we have seen our 15-year-old neighbor walking outside in the evenings with a baseball bat because he is unsure of his own safety. We have spoken to a woman who had her door kicked in while she was at home by an unknown perpetrator, rocking her to her core. We have heard countless stories about apartment and car break-ins. This is not normal, nor should it be considered normal. For a property who boasts their safety and security, brag about an in-unit alarm system, and has fob entry access to the garage, and they surely charge you a premium for it, it does not make much sense to have a garage that people can walk into, walk around the gate. It does not make sense to boast about the alarm systems in individual units that aren't fixed for months, if at all. After all is said and done, we are here, because we are at our wits' end, and exasperated simply from not knowing what else to do or where else to go in an attempt to simply make sure all residents, adults, children, and even their animals feel safe in their community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If you want to leave a copy of your comments with Mrs. Hernandez, that
You
would be helpful for me.
Can you leave both comments with Mrs. Hernandez, please?
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all the people I have signed up for council, for citizen participation. We have a couple of appointments to make, and I'll start with Mrs. Plangan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the appointment of Aubrey King as a member of the Diversity Committee.
I second that.
Second by Mr. Hurst. Have any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? Dr. Trout?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the appointment of Dustin Cusan as a member of the Green Team Executive Committee.
I would like to second that as well.
Second by Mr. Hurst. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. If I get Mr. King and Mr. Kuzan to join us up front, please. You want to stand up front here? This is relatively painless. We haven't lost anybody in weeks. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. When we get to the point of I swear or affirm, you can select whichever one fits you best. I, and your name? do swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States.
and that I will be faithful
I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland.
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
And to support the Constitution and laws thereof.
and that I will,
And that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of
execute the office of Green Team
according to the Constitution and laws of the state.
according to the constitutional laws.
Congratulations. Consider this the first night. This is the first night of your 14-year appointment. Thank you.
Congratulations, welcome aboard.
No, the average is 40.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
We appreciate your time.
As many of you know, the city's committee system is incredibly important to the council in terms of its engagement with public affairs. A couple of quick council announcements. I wanted to acknowledge city staff, particularly Matt Corley. This past Sunday, we had the final program of the Sunday concert series at Allen Pond. This one was memorable, as most are. We were pleased to have the Bowie State University Concert Band to perform a patriotic concert to give us a moment to remember the events of 9/11 and all the events that occurred, and to give us a moment to thank the men and women that serve in the military forces of the United States here and abroad, and particularly those that we sometimes forget about that are in harm's way. Gives us an opportunity to remember how important their contributions are and how important their contributions have been since the very beginning of this country. So on behalf of all of us, I would like to extend our thanks to Matt Corley, in charge of Matt Corley Productions. He puts out a string of successful things. City manager's report.
I don't have a particular report, Mr. Mayor, but however, I will let you know that we'll have the business operator talk to the Peralta family and see what we can get an assessment of the situation in the Bowen and see how we can help them.
Okay. All right, council, again, consent agenda items A through H. Do I have a motion? So moved by Mr. Marcos, second by Dr. Trout. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, before we jump into the SMAGLEV discussion, well, that is an ugly acronym. I want to acknowledge that as this project has been going on, we have reached out to a number of public officials at every level of government, and we are pleased that a number of them have joined us tonight. I can't say too much about how responsive we have found the governor's office to be, our legislative officers to be, and our federal officers have been. We've had the opportunity to have two meetings here with the governor where we were very unambiguous, very straightforward about our concerns and our position on this MAGLEV proposal, and quite frankly made sure that everyone understood that as being discussed was a completely unacceptable condition for us. But it has been helpful to have a cadre of public officials that we can call on. And I want to acknowledge those that are here tonight. First off, my favorite senator, because he is the senator from our district, Senator Doug Peters is here. Thank you, Senator. I'm going to, after I introduce them, I'll give you a chance if you guys want to say something before we start the discussion. Delegate Valentino Smith is here. She's been very helpful. Delegate Marvin Holmes is here from 23B. A former city council colleague and county council representative, Todd Turner, is here. And I saw Senator Joanne Benson from District 24 here a minute ago. Thank you, Senator. Senator Benson is organizing a meeting in Glen Arden next Thursday, so if any of you want to rejoin us there, hopefully we'll do that. And then we have representatives from Senator Cardin's office, Senator Van Hollen's office, and I think Congressman Hoyer's office. Last week, like I said, we've had several meetings with our 2 United States senators and with our congressmen. Last Thursday, we had a meeting here with the top staff members from the 2 U.S. senators and both congressmen, and we spent about 2 hours going over this, and like I said, we left them with no question as to where we are on this, and we fully expect some positive comments from them. But if they wanted, they said, in recognition of all the help we've got, if you guys want to take a minute or so, each one of you make a quick comment, and then I want to get into the project. So I'll recognize Senator Peters first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I know you have been on top of this issue, as have your colleagues. It makes it very easy for us to work with you when you've done a lot of the groundwork on this project. I came here a couple weeks ago and sat through about 3 hours of testimony, and it was very well written, very well documented. I left with a book this thick of the issues and how they impacted Bowie. And, you know, you come here with an open mind on all issues. But on this issue, you know, I am definitely a no. Mr. Mayor, you and I spoke the other day, and I think your quote was, "I'd like to take a hammer and drive a stake right through this project."
Subtle.
Well, before you clap, you need to know he's not really the greatest with a hammer. So I took it to the next step, and I said, "I'll hold the stake for you."
Okay.
So that's a lot of trust between the city and the state.
All
But
right.
I'm here with my colleagues. You know, we're going to be unified with you. We're going to be against the project. And I just really want to thank the citizens for coming out. This is what Bowie's all about. You know, we listen to you. We move forward with you. But on this project, you know, we're a no. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, sir. Delegate Johnson, Delegate Marvin Holmes?
Thank you,
Welcome,
Mr.
sir.
Mayor, and all the council members that are here, and the citizens of Bowie. I want to emphasize what Senator Peters just said. We are all in accord with this. If Doug's going to hold the stake, I'll have my hand beneath his.
You guys are reckless.
Not that I'm in error, not that I'm judging your ability to hit that stake, but just in case you hit someone's hand, I don't want it to be mine. This issue, for those who enjoy history, has gone on, and it began in May 19th, 1899. That's when the Railroad Association, in a former name, began. One of the things that has concerned me as I read through the documentation is that when the franchise was purchased, which is documented in the Public Service Commission records of November 15, 2015, as I recall, the rights of ways for the maglev transferred to the new purchase agreement, to the new franchise. That concerns me. This was an authorization by the Maryland General Assembly back in 1920, 1935. Some of us were here, but not most of us. And so there may be an opportunity for us to be a gadfly in the process, but I don't know how much we're going to be able to defer the process. We might be able to, like I said, to be a gadfly in the process, which might be enough to move the alignment to a different spot based upon the federal regulations and the federal assistance. So we are here, as Senator Peters already announced and suggested, we are here to be an assistance to all of you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Delegate Valentina Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I want to tell the public it's always so uncomfortable to have my back to you. I apologize, but I no longer get to sit up there, so I have to face this way.
We appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I understand that there might be some coordination issues with respect to the hammer and the stake, so nobody worry, I'll be multitasking and coordinating the event. I want to thank you for your leadership and for your work with respect to understanding this project and bringing together public meetings with BWRR and now with MDOT, MTA, so that we understand the process. I know you want me to be brief, Mayor, you always do. I'll try and
Always
raise-
anxious for you to try something new.
I know. I want to touch on three things because as Delegate Holmes suggested, this has got some federal implications to it. And to the extent that that may start to prevail or control, I just wanted to highlight three areas that I would touch on in more detail later, but to touch on tonight. Three things. I think we need to look at this process, and we need to help to really understand for the citizens that it's had integrity, it's been transparent, and that there's been the proper amount of independence between BWRR, who are the proponents and engineers, and MDOT and MTA are supposed to be doing this NEPA report, which you'll hear more about. I have had some concerns that they may or may not be at sufficient arm's length in this process, and/or that there are some symptoms of this process that are tending to intimate that there's been a preferred option for the alignment, and that that preferred option is the WBNA trail, and that there's energies pushing towards a preferred option that may be taking away from what's supposed to be a very independent process. So that was one of the concerns I wanted to highlight tonight. The second one was on this next stage and the choosing of the alignment. And it does concern me that now we're going to hear that they've narrowed down from 6 proposed alignments to 4 proposed alignments, and that we will get access to some preliminary alternative screening report that has some surviving routes. I'm not a telepathy, but I suspect that the WBNA route survived into the next round of reports. And it's been unclear what conditions have been being used to determine the lines and the alignments. And with that, what I would expect MDOT or MTA tonight is to let us know what issues or when they will be considering economic viability, ridership, revenue projections, ticket prices, estimated cost of construction, construction funding and financing, construction schedule, eminent domain and land acquisition, ownership issues, operations, safety, maintenance, technology, trains, noise, vibrations, magnetic fields, and many of the other things that the citizens have raised that they do not feel yet has been part of the understanding or what's being used to determine the continuation of the alignments or the viability of alignments. In addition to that, you know, in terms of the next steps, it is whether we do not support it and you do not support it, and hopefully we can get the state not to support it, but how much that will matter given the $28 million and the dedication of what we don't know a federal government to be surmising, is that we have the FRA come in next as the Federal Railroad Administration and assure us about the independence, the scope, and what is happening with respect to their monitoring of BWRR and MDOT in this process. That we understand the county position. Has the county actually submitted anything? Have we seen anything as a city? And what position are they taking with respect to having presented anything with respect to the alignments? Your role, Mr. Mayor, continuing to be not only the ardent opposition, but helping to uncover some of these concerns that we have with respect to the process. And then the elected officials' role. You know, we're going to have our research to oppose it, but we're going to have to do an analysis and need help on the current public-private partnership statute that we passed not too long ago, because I was there, right, Marvin? Delegate Holmes, I was there then. So we need your help, we need the citizens' help, and we need to look at that current statute to see, now that we're actually undertaking the concept of a huge public-private partnership with foreign investment, whether that statute is sufficiently protecting the citizens of the state. And so with that, I just want to conclude one of my greatest concerns with respect to how this is proceeding is that I'd been in communications. Senator Peters and I strongly promised you and the citizens that we would ask MTA not only to be here, but to explain the process. And MTA had been communicating with me through a gentleman named John Trussler, who seemed to have good integrity and was very responsive, that he would do all that he could to not only explain the NEPA process, but assure people, you know, how or when their concerns would be taken. And he drafted a letter to me and Senator Peters outlining all of this, and he circulated it to high officials at both MDOT and MTA. And that letter could never be released. And that's just a symptom that's concerning me as to who and what is controlling communications on this process. So with that, I know the audience has a lot to say. I just wanted to raise those three areas, and I'll be there multitasking on that stakeholder.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Appreciate it. Councilman Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. It's good to be before you again. I appreciated the opportunity to be here at your July meeting where we had discussions with the proponents of this. One of the benefits of going after my colleagues at the state level, and particularly Ms. Valentino-Smith, is I don't have that much more to say.
Thank you.
So I'll follow the mayor's rule and have the two Bs, you know, to be quick and to be seated. But let me say this, from the county council member's perspective, I share the same concerns as my colleagues, and I appreciate the efforts that the city has made to reach out both to the state and the governor, and particularly to our federal representatives. We, as you, have a small role in trying to advocate the position of the county. I noticed on your agenda, you know, you went through your transportation priorities process last month. And I've looked through the letter that you're sending to myself and to our state representatives. I don't see this on that at all, right? And if you look at the county's priority list, it's not on our list as well. And so, you know, that tells us something about making sure that we have our local input as part of that. The one comment I will say to my colleague, Ms. Valentino-Smith, about the county role so far is that as part of the scoping process, they provided initial comments to MTA and MDOT back when this was initially getting started. We've had at least one briefing on this as the county council earlier this year. As I mentioned, probably last time we were before you. As chairman of our Transportation, Housing, and Environment Committee, I've got the assurance from the chair of our council that we will be conducting our own meeting. I'm not sure if it's going to be before the entire county council or before my committee, so we'll make as part of this upcoming, we're going back into session as of next week, and so we'll be trying to schedule that so we get the same information that the city is getting from both the proponent and from the agency that's responsible for doing the NEPA study. I can simply say all 6 alternatives that are being considered on this project touch in some way my county council district. And so obviously I'm very concerned about what that impact is going to be, and I think Ms. Valentino-Smith mentioned those issues that still have not been addressed so far as part of this process. And so I'll sit down and hopefully listen to our state representatives at MDOT and MTA to explain what they're doing with this process.
Okay.
And I do appreciate the residents who have contacted me, as well as the other elected officials, expressing your views and providing that information, particularly those who are the decision makers in this case. And we will be there with you and making sure, along with the city and the county, that your voices are heard as part of that process.
Okay, thanks,
so
sir.
that's my commitment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We are very pleased to have a great friend and a great supporter from District 24, correct? Senator Joanne Benson, who we've known.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen, Lottie, Dottie, and everybody. If Fannie Lou Hamer were standing here, she would say, we're in this bag together. It's not about Bowie. It's not about Bowie. It's not just Bowie. It's Prince George's County. It's Glen Arden, Springdale. I could go down the list and tell you all the places that will be impacted. And so I'm here tonight because I'm with the citizens of Bowie, because they're with us. For the past 3 or 4 weeks, we have been working almost every day on this matter. My phone has been ringing. We have been having small meetings to talk about this. We talk to senior citizens who've lived in their homes 53 years, and we look at the map, it's going right through their homes. That's unacceptable. On Thursday, September the 7th, we're asking the state, the members of MEGLEV, to please come inside the Beltway because we have been totally neglected. And we're hoping that they will do just that. We sent a message to the governor saying it's unacceptable. Before Senator Trotter passed away, he sat down with me and told me the story of Glenart and 495. He said there was a study about 495. And the study indicated that the road would go through Glenarden. The citizens of Glenarden were opposed to it. But by the time they got themselves together to go before the state, the deal had been cut with the federal government. 495 went through Glenarden and separated it. They even took the mayor's home in Glenarden. So you have a separation of 495, but you also have a separation of 704, a state highway. So Glenarden is separated by 2 state highways. It's unthinkable. It's a despicable thought that this highway, that this train would come through Glenarden. Starting in Fairmount Heights, one of the oldest African-American communities in the state of Maryland. Unacceptable. So we want to hear on Thursday night from these people as to what the plan is. We do not object to a fast-moving train. We don't object to that. But not in Bowie, not in Glenarden, taking the homes of people. It is, the way the lines are drawn, it is just unbelievable. So we're interested in knowing what the plan is, and people need to know a little bit more about the MEGLEV. But the people in Bowie and the people who have seen the plan, those of us who have worked on the plan, are beside ourselves. We just can't believe that this is going on. The federal people understand it. A train coming through Prince George's County, not even stopping. So if I want to catch the train, I have to go to Union Station or go to BWI. That's a little crazy as far as I'm concerned. So I really want to say thank you tonight for the people who are here. I also want to especially thank all the citizens who have sat down with us and worked on this plan. I also want to thank the presenters for coming here tonight, and hopefully they will understand the urgency of working closer with us, and we expect to see them on Thursday night at Charles Herbert Flowers High School at 7 o'clock to do their presentation. And we want everybody in this room to please come. We're looking forward to seeing you. But remember, we're in this bag together.
Okay,
Thank you.
ma'am. Okay. All right. Again, on behalf of all of us here, I can't thank you enough, the elected officials from all the different levels that have worked with us together. At this point, I'm going to invite up some important state folks that have a message. Oh, I'm sorry. Delegate, our Delegate 23B, Chairman. Did you want to make a quick comment? I didn't see you standing over there. This is so unusual for a chairman to be just so subtle. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I had a hard time finding a parking place, but I did catch a cab. Uber carried me over from where I parked. Thank you, Mayor, and ladies and gentlemen of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. But I am really here to hear from the citizens, to hear what their input is. It's most important in us to making decisions in the state to follow their lead. And without that advice and without their position, we know nothing about what the folks really want. We're interested in that. We're willing to work. We want to work with them, and we will work with the Department of Transportation to make sure that the people in Bowie will not be affected adversely with any train coming through the middle of it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Such eloquence. All right, we are also pleased tonight, we have a couple of very special guests from MDOT, Mr. Earl Lewis and Mr. Bradley Smith, and we're going to invite them up. Before they come up, I want to say publicly how much the council and I appreciated the governor's openness to the conversations we've had. I had a very fortuitous and unplanned discussion with him the day after our last meeting here. We just happened to show up at the same place together and had a very brief discussion, and I expressed some concerns. And he turned to his staff aide and said, set up a meeting with Fred very quickly so we can resolve this. And by that Friday, we had a meeting with the governor. We scheduled a meeting here, and council was there. We sat down for about 2 hours. And I'm firmly convinced that the governor took a lot of attention and paid a lot of attention and was very positive and supportive. And to that end, he sent Mr. Lewis and Mr. Smith to give us a presentation and I think a communication. Welcome,
Thank you,
sir.
Mayor Robinson, council members, esteemed elected officials, and members of the public who are here this evening. This is how democracy is supposed to work. I would like to read a letter that was sent from Secretary Pete Ron to you. After I read that letter, I also have copies, hopefully enough for everybody here in the audience, if it's okay for you if I give it out.
Yeah, well, you can leave them with Hernandez, Mrs. Hernandez, and anybody who wants a copy can get it.
All right, thank you. As you are aware, the Federal Railroad Administration and Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration recently initiated a National Environmental Policy Act review for private sector Baltimore, Washington Rapid Rail's proposed superconducting maglev project between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. The review is evaluating the project's potential impacts to environmental, social, and cultural resources, including any potential impacts within local communities seeking the least disruptive alignment. In addition, Governor Larry Hogan and the Maryland Department of Transportation have been closely monitoring the public information meetings being held regarding the SC maglev. Unfortunately, there have been several conceivable routes proposed for study that have been presented to citizens during the meetings, which would cut through existing residential areas. It has always been the understanding of the Hogan administration this proposed project would only use existing right-of-way intended for these types of purposes and have minimal impacts on those who live and work along the final route should the project come to fruition. The Hogan administration's position in regards to using existing right-of-way, this proposed project has not and will never change. It is important to understand that this project is solely in the study phase and no plans for construction have been approved or even proposed at this early stage. More detailed information regarding potential impacts, project cost, alignment, station locations, construction techniques, and system design will become available during the NEPA process, and soliciting public comment will continue to be a vital component of this process as it moves forward. Please be confident and rest assured that Governor Hogan and the entire administration are paying very close attention to this process and will continue to stand firmly against any proposed routes that would harm local communities or affect the quality of life of the citizens along the proposed path. We simply won't allow that to happen. We encourage citizens to attend and participate in any future meetings regarding this proposed project and participate in the public feedback process. Citizen participation in the process is vital to the process of determining the viability of SC maglev. Should you have any questions, please contact Deputy Administrator Suhair Al-Khatib via email at salkhatib@mta.maryland.gov or telephone at 410-767-3787. Sincerely, P.K. Ron, Secretary, Maryland Department of Transportation.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let me, just one paragraph in there that strikes my chord very seriously, and I just want to repeat this. Please be confident and rest assured that Governor Hogan and the entire administration are paying very close attention to this process and will continue to stand firmly against any proposed routes that would harm local communities or affect the quality of life of the citizens along the proposed path. We simply won't allow this to happen.
Correct.
I think that's a good statement, and we're on the same page.
Yes.
Okay. We thank you.
You're welcome. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brad Smith, the Director at MDOT, who will give a presentation on the process.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Good evening. I'll just wait a second for the presentation to be projected. All right, well, good evening, and I'd like to thank the mayor and the members of the council for having me this evening. I'm going to follow up Earl's statement with a brief presentation that's hopefully informative to the folks that came out this evening. So I've got the presentation broken up into 3 parts, which I'll go through one by one. First, I want to start out with an overview of the state's role in this project. High level, the state is facilitating BWRR's proposal. So BWRR, who was out here in July, is a private entity proposing this project. The state is facilitating the review of their project and taking it through a federal process. So as part of that, we're administering federal grant funding that the state received back in 2015. And we're also conducting the environmental reviews that go along with that federal funding that we received. Second piece is an overview of the NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. This is the environmental reviews that are done at the federal level whenever a large undertaking such as this project are being evaluated. So as part of that process, the lead federal agency is the Federal Railroad Administration, who MDOT is working with very closely on the analysis and on the evaluation that's being done. We're also working with a number of federal, state, and local permitting agencies to identify potential impacts that this project could have if it were to be implemented. And the NEPA process provides numerous opportunities for the public to review and comment on that analysis as it's being compiled, as it's being disseminated for reviews. And then last, I'm going to finish up with next steps. So where are we moving forward in the immediate term? And the one key area that I want to highlight is that we'll be holding our 3rd round of public meetings in October to share additional information on the project and where we are in this process. And we're finalizing dates and locations for all 5 of the meetings, but I do want to highlight that we do have the Bowie meeting nailed down for Saturday, October 14th at Bowie State University. So I want to encourage everyone that's here tonight or has an interest in the project to attend that meeting or another meeting that may be more convenient for their schedule. So the first piece here, the state's role in the project. First, a little bit of background for those of you that may not have been to the meeting in July. I'm going to just give a very brief overview on BWRR. They're a private Maryland-based company that's proposing to build and operate a superconducting magnetic levitation train between Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. That segment is proposed to have 3 stations, one in Baltimore City, one at BWI Airport, and one in Washington, D.C. The SC maglev train uses technology that allows trains to operate over 300 miles an hour. At those speeds, a train between Baltimore and Washington would take only 15 minutes to get between the 2 cities. And as part of BWR's proposal, they would eventually like to extend the system up into New York City. So the state's role, I mentioned earlier, we're facilitating the review of BWRR's proposal. So our role is really to take their proposal, what they would like to do, and evaluate it and take it through this federal process. And the reason we're doing this is because as a private entity, BWRR is not eligible to receive directly the federal grant funding that triggers this type of analysis. So back in 2015, MDOT, on behalf of the project, submitted a grant application to the Federal Railroad Administration and was awarded $27.8 million to be applied to this project. And that would conduct the necessary environmental reviews on the proposal. So our responsibilities include administering the grants funding, conducting the NEPA documentation for the proposal, and also overseeing public outreach that's part of the NEPA process. A little bit about the project schedule. So I've talked about a number of these agencies already, but I just want to, sometimes it's good to visualize and see this up on a chart. So we do have a number of players that are working on the study and working on the grant and the NEPA analysis. At the top is the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Railroad Administration. They were the ones that provided the grant funding to the state and are acting as the lead federal agency under NEPA. Underneath of them is the Maryland Department of Transportation, the agency that I represent. We're the grantee and the direct recipient of the grant funding. And then from there, we have two columns separating different aspects of the project. On the right-hand side, we have MDOT'S Maryland Transit Administration, the MTA, which is overseeing the environmental analysis. And they have an environmental consultant helping them on that work. So that's the environmental analysis, the public outreach, all that is being handled at the state level on the right-hand side of the chart here. On the left-hand side, we've got the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. Because of the economic development aspects of the project, we decided to bring in MEDCO to help us partner with BWRR in the administration of the project in this particular grant study. Working directly with MEDCO is BWRR, who I mentioned earlier is the project proponent. And on the left-hand side, they're responsible for engineering and technology associated with the project. So just to be clear, anything that has to do with engineering, the project proposal, technology, that sort of thing is happening on the left-hand side of the chart, and on the right-hand side of this chart is the environmental review and the planning study and those kind of actions. So next I'm going to get into the second part of the presentation, an overview of the NEPA process. So the National Environmental Policy Act is a federal law enacted, taking effect in 1970. So at this point, it's been on the books for about 50 years or so. So it's a pretty process that is, has been gone through a number of times and is very set and when the action is taken. So NEPA is triggered whenever there's a proposed federal action. And there's three cases when that would happen. One, if federal funding is being used to undertake an action. The second one is if a federal permit would be required in order to undertake that action, or if federal property is being used. So in this case, it's been triggered by the use of federal funding, but really a project of this size, any three of those could trigger the need for a NEPA analysis. When you do the analysis, environmental impacts to natural resources, social resources, economic and cultural resources are studied as part of the process and weighed against the project's purpose and need, which is the problem statement, what you're trying to, the problem you're trying to solve by undertaking the project or the study, and also weighed against the no-build alternative to see if we did not undertake this action, what would happen as opposed to undertaking the action. So coordination with a number of relevant federal, state, and local agencies is required to identify those impacts. First, identify, figure out the magnitude of those impacts and if they can be minimized or mitigated. So the findings are shared with the public for review and comment at a number of different milestones throughout that process. We've already started that with the 2 rounds of public workshops that we've had to date, and that's continuing throughout this process. And just to go back kind of to the point I made on the other slide is that the NEPA process is overseen by a lead federal agency. So because it's a federal action, there's a federal agency that leads that process, and in this case, our lead federal agency is the Federal Railroad Administration. And under NEPA, there's a number of different documents that you can, that are required to satisfy the requirements of NEPA. For this action on the SC Maglev project, FRA is requiring an environmental impact statement, which is the most comprehensive of all the analysis under NEPA. a little bit more about the NEPA process. There's a number of incremental steps and milestones that you go through during the process. The first one being scoping. So for this project, that was actually initiated in November of 2016. And at that point, the lead federal agency, FRA, publishes a notice in the Federal Register, a notice of intent to undertake a study, basically saying that we've initiated a study to look at a problem and we're soliciting input into this process. So that began in November of 2016. From there, using the input that you have received during scoping, you move into the purpose and need phase of the project, basically identifying what's the problem that you would be solving by undertaking this action. We've started that process as well. Earlier this year, we developed the draft purpose and need statement, and that was shared with the public in a public meeting forum. From there, once you have that nailed down, you start to develop alternatives that could potentially solve the purpose and need of the project. And that's really the phase that we're in right now. So there's not one solution that would solve every single problem. So you develop a range of alternatives to look at what are the pros and cons of each of the alternatives. During that process, you're looking at potential environmental impacts and other factors that would allow you to determine if an alternative is worthy of moving forward into the process. Once you have that analysis done, you do what's called the draft environmental impact statement. That's a fairly large report that basically compiles all the work that has been done to date. That's approved at the federal level and put out for public review and comment, and you would have a public hearing to share that information and receive feedback from the public. After that's done, you would move into the final phase of the final environmental impact statement and record of decision, which would close out the NEPA process and allow the project to move into the next phase, whether it's permitting, final design, and ultimately into construction once funding and a number of things are lined up. So milestones to date, I mentioned the scoping process was opened in November of last year. As part of that phase, we had in December of 2016 a round of public workshops to introduce the project to the public. And because the corridor is so wide, we're looking at a study area between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. We decided to have 5 public meetings as part of that process. So in December, over a week and a half or so, we had 5 meetings up and down the corridor to introduce the project to the public and solicit those initial scoping comments. With the feedback we received at those public meetings, we developed the purpose and need statement, which was shared at a round of open houses in October of 2017. Again, we followed up with a similar format as in December and had 5 total meetings up and down the corridor. At that meeting, we shared the draft purpose and need statement as well as preliminary alignments that were under consideration. There were a total of 6 alignments that were shared in April as well as the no-build alternative. So I have a map here of the 6 alignments that were shared. Many of you are maybe familiar with this figure. One thing I do want to point out is that the colored lines are not necessarily to scale or in exact locations. In order to make the map legible, we had to make the line thickness thick enough that it could be visible and also identify between the number of routes that in some cases overlap. So in order to make it visible, we actually put the lines next to each other as opposed to on top of each other for visibility's sake. So this map at this scale with this resolution is not meant to convey exact locations of impacts or potential impacts. So I do want to highlight that for those in the audience. Moving forward, we'll have much more detailed maps and properly sized lines and alignments that will allow you to better interpret what the potential impacts of those corridors could be. So I mentioned that April was the last time that we were out in a public forum. Since then, we've been doing a number of activities to continue to move the project and this study forward. One of them is that we've compiled all the comments received at the open houses and through other forums. We have a project website where people submit comments. We have an email address. We've been receiving letters through mail. So we're tracking all of the comments we've received to date and sharing them with the project team so we have a good handle of what we're hearing from the public and how that may influence us moving forward as we're looking at alignments and looking at what we're going to do at the next phase. We've also been coordinating with the federal, state, and local permitting agencies to solicit their input on the preliminary alignments. As you can imagine, looking at a 40-mile long corridor, there's a number of resources that could potentially be impacted. So federal agencies such as the Army Corps of Engineers or U.S. Fish and Wildlife, MDE, Maryland Historical Trust, and about a dozen others have been helping us to understand what potential impacts could be and how that can influence the decision-making process moving forward. We've also continued to refine the alignments to when we are made aware of potential impacts or during our investigations we uncover something. We've been looking to refine alignments to avoid potential impacts where possible. If it's not possible to completely avoid, we've been looking to minimize impacts of those preliminary alignments. And then we've also been gearing up for this third round of meetings that we're planning to hold in October. And I'm going to finish up here with next steps as far as what we're going to be doing in the coming months. So the third round of public meetings is scheduled for October. At that round of meetings, again, we're going to have 5 meetings up and down the corridor. And we'll be sharing with the public the results of the preliminary alternatives screening report. And what that will have included in it is a reduced number of alignments. So we had 6 alignments in April. We'll be reducing that number of alignments with what we share in October. We'll have more detailed information about the alternatives that are remaining and that are being carried forward at that time. And then we'll have information regarding potential environmental impacts of each of the alignments. I mentioned we're going to have 5 meetings total. We have the Bowie meeting in Prince George's County scheduled for Saturday, October 14th. And we have 4 other locations that we'll be finalizing in the coming days here, and we'll be putting out mailings and sufficient notice for the public on that. And then after that, once we get through these meetings, we'll be looking to put together the alternatives report and then move into developing the draft environmental impact statement following these meetings. So for those of you that want to learn more about the project and stay engaged, we do have a project website, which I'd like to direct everyone to. That's bwmaglev.info. We have all the information that has been shared to date at the December meetings, the April meetings on that website, and that will continue to be the central repository for all project-related documents and NEPA-related documents put up there. You could also email the project team at info@baltimorewashingtonscmaglevproject.com. Those comments would come in and be compiled with all the other comments we've received to date and will be taken into account when decisions are made. And then I'd also encourage folks to attend one of the upcoming meetings that we plan on holding. So with that, I'll wrap up and turn it back over to the council.
Okay, well, if you can bear with us for a little, I'm going to have some public comment, and then the council will have some questions for you.
Sure.
Okay. Before you go, let me just ask you one question. You talked about at some point in time you're going to reduce the routes. I just want to make sure, I've read this paragraph again, and it just seems to me that if I read that paragraph and I look at those routes, I know a couple of them have to disappear. At what point would you make that decision?
That will be made prior to the meetings.
The October?
Yeah, prior to the October meetings.
Okay.
We're still working with FRA right now on what the alignments would be that are carried forward.
Okay, all right, because like I said, we will be following that very closely. And,
Yep.
I do appreciate you coming down here tonight, and Mr. Lewis, I do appreciate, I don't know where he went. Okay, I do appreciate both of you coming. And I do want to say, we do appreciate, the legislative people and the governor's office that have been open to hear our concerns. Because as I'm sure you could say, if you lived in one of those neighborhoods, I can pretty well easily predict what your position would be. Sure. Okay, if you would bear with us a second. I've got
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would it make sense for us to ask questions first?
I'm sorry?
Would it make sense for the council to ask questions first to potentially preempt what we might hear from the audience, or would we rather do?
I think I'd rather hear, like we normally do, hear what they have to
All right,
say.
that works for me.
We'll go
Just
from
wanted to
there.
throw it out there.
Okay. All right. Do you have
Would you like me to stay up here or going to go to this side?
I'm sorry?
Would you like me to stay here
Well,
in
just
the
have a
seat, or-
seat wherever you can find one, or location, or, see Mr. Brown's back there.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, let me, oh my goodness.
Mr. Mayor.
Let me see, we do have another guest here, and that's Keisha Brown, who's going to be the spokesperson, I guess, for this. So you want to say hi so people can get a face to the name?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Keisha Brown. I am the Director of Community and External Affairs for Baltimore-Washington Rapid Rail. So I appreciate the opportunity to briefly introduce myself to you as well as the community. As Bradley Smith said, we are in the environmental impact study phase of this process. And so for me, I wanted to hit the ground running, and for me, it's important to listen and learn.
Okay.
And so I'm going to be launching an additional platform of engagement with the community, and whether it's coming to folks' living rooms or HOA association meetings or local libraries, to be able to offer two real reasons. One is to provide clarity of information, as well as to hear citizen concerns.
Okay.
And so I have some sheets of flyers that I'll be giving to the city clerk, as well as, if it's okay, putting in the back for members of the
Well, if you
public.
can just leave them with the city clerk, anybody
Perfect.
can, once one can pick it up.
Perfect, and so I'll leave those there. For me, this is a transformational project for our community as well as our entire county. And I want to make sure that we have good information as we go through this process. So I want to make myself available to the entire council as well as the city of Bowie.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Okay, I have a number of people that have signed up to speak. Let me just suggest this. Some of you spoke at our last meeting, so if you're going to speak a second time, if you can make your comments as concise as you possibly can. I have a whole lot of speakers, so if you can keep your comments to just about 2 minutes or so, I would really appreciate that. First speaker will be Linda Tucker, and she'll be followed by James Parsons. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, City Council, guests from Anne Arundel County, and my fellow Prince George's County residents. I had hoped to hear for some clarification on this project. I spoke at the last meeting. My opposition is obvious. Mr. Smith, your presentation was no different than the sales pitches we've gotten for months. Pretty pictures and misinformation, and I really don't know where to begin. Let's start with MEDCO. MEDCO is basically the state of Maryland's real estate development agency, which means they're a private company, but they get to use the government as their backing. Grants, they get to use eminent domain if they wanted to. They get to basically be the government, but they're a private agency. And if this is a true NEPA process designed to get information, then how come at this point we're still going through it? We've uncovered enough evidence to prove that this project is not viable in our communities. And this project is offensive. Delegate Valentino Smith stated earlier, this is not a community-based project. This is not a commuter train. There's no benefit to the local community. There's devastation of century-old communities, including Marriott Mansion, which is on the National Registry as a historical site. There's been no feasibility study. There has been no clear ridership information. This is just a Governor Hogan pet project. There's been lack of transparency. The scoping meetings that were referenced were held between the Thanksgiving and Christmas. Who cares about anything but enjoying the Christian holidays and the holidays that are around us? Who cares about the government at that point? And there's been specific data that has not been disseminated. This information about the lines, I have an answer to your question, Mr. Mayor. We're being used as guinea pigs. There is no public, open agreement with any other state or municipality, including New York City and including Washington, D.C., that approved this project. This is a Governor Hogan pet project. And I'm going to speak a little closer, and I'm going to look at you, Mr. Mayor. This is a Ponzi scheme. JR Central, the Japanese company that is behind this project, was given billions in stimulus package from their government, with the exception that they sell their product abroad. So we bailed out the banking industry and we bailed out the auto industry. And now this company, we're expected to bail out the Tokyo train. That's a ridiculous statement.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
There's also a great deal of disrespect. As far as the route selection, anyone that can read a map and knows this area knows that that route G will go through, the only route that's possible is the yellow line G. NSA and the U.S. Army will not allow routes F and J, the blue lines. CSX owns the land for Route E. That's not going to happen. Routes H and I, the red lines, go over Bowie State University, which is one of 4 historically black colleges in our state. The timeline, we've heard 2019, we've heard 5 years, we've heard indefinite. When are we going to know? BWRR has told us that they will invoke an eminent domain. How does the governor intend to do that? I'd like to know where that comes into play. My Sicilian heritage has granted me clairvoyancy. I predict all of our questions will be answered on Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, the day after the election.
Okay, thank you.
I also have, I can save money. Germany is selling their maglev. Go to eBay. I have 2 more statements. And I just want to make it clear. This is a white, male, Republican real estate developer elected to an executive office using his power for personal gain. In one sentence, I just linked the nation's 2nd most popular governor with the nation's most hated president in history, and the political season hasn't started yet. And that will be my goal for the next year. And in following, if they build it, they will come. Only works in the movies. Last century, the Concorde was supposed to revolutionize air travel. But in the end, it was too expensive to be viable. You assume that people will pay whatever price to get somewhere faster, and you know what happens when you assume.
Thank you. Mr. James Parsons? James Parsons, are you here? Okay, thank you. Maureen Peterson? Maureen Peterson. Oh, welcome, ma'am.
Well, I'm also Italian, but I prepared something a little less passionate, although I totally agree with everything the previous speaker said. So my name is Maureen Peterson, and I'm the president of the Patuxent Riding HOA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Mayor. Patuxent Riding is a self-contained neighborhood of 78 homes off Racetrack Road, very near Bowie State University. We are extremely concerned about the potential negative implications and impact of this project on our community. One of the renderings of the proposed green route shows the project cutting right through our neighborhood with the potential of losing several homes through eminent domain. Our community is one where neighbors know each other, help each other, and look out for one another. We are proud of our community. This project has the potential to ruin the culture, integrity, and very viability of our neighborhood, as well as drastically decreasing our property values, while not benefiting our community in the least. There are many reasons why we oppose this project. Here are just a few. There appears to be little or no empirical data on the effects of prolonged exposure to this type of energy source for flora, fauna, or humans. There are no benefits of this project to the residents or commuters of this community, which of course then calls into question the lawful use of eminent domain for tearing down homes and decimating neighborhoods. There is existing transportation infrastructure that could be more easily and more economically be enhanced and improved. Our community is an established one. Many of our homeowners have a lot of equity in our homes. All of us stand to lose much of this equity, if not all, if this project moves forward. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the residents of the Patuxent Riding community, I respectfully ask that the project not move forward. Thank you, sir.
Eddie Mae Teasdale. Ms. Teasdale? And it should be followed by Tara Guevara. Oh, is Ms. Teasdale here? Okay. Tara Guevara? Welcome, ma'am. It should be followed by Aviva Dubetsky. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Just like to reintroduce myself. I did speak at the last Maglev meeting, and every one of these meetings leaves us flustered and more wanting for answers which we don't get. I'm going to condense what I was planning on saying to try to make it a little more succinct. Basically, many of the people who live here in this room, who live along this corridor, especially in Bowie, we came to Bowie because we wanted to be part of Bowie, okay? We didn't come to Bowie just because it was the only place we could live. We wanted to be part of this community. And now everything about what I have built in Bowie, in my family, in my home, in my business is at risk. I don't need a fancy map to tell you because my house touches the WBNA trail. The last time we spoke, Maglev assured us that they heard our concerns over the destruction of the WBNA trail system. They presented us with a lovely image of a concrete monstrosity that would offer us a synergistic use of the trail, and they would further sweeten that deal by throwing in some water fountains and some toilets. What they failed to talk about were all the homes and businesses and farms that were going to be impacted as they ripped through our neighborhoods to give us this lovely concrete monstrosity with some toilets and some water fountains. They continuously called our trail a defunct and abandoned rail line, when in fact it's Martin Luther King Boulevard headed out of DC. The paved portion runs from Lanham through Bowie into Anne Arundel County. It's a multi-use trail. It's a very viable trail. None of us want to live next to a giant tower. None of us want to walk or ride our horses, take bikes, walk our children next to something like this. And how long will it take to build that? We still don't know. They have acknowledged some of our public outcry, but still have not addressed many of our other concerns about historic impact in our community. Let's be realistic. Bowie itself is a significantly historic city. Mayor Robinson, you just sat on Fox 5 during their zip trip, and you were touting all of the history of Bowie and the things that make our community great and a great place to live and places you wanted people to come and join us in Bowie. All of these reasons that you cited are now at risk. Once we lose the history of Bowie, it is gone forever. It is permanent. It is not something we can get back. We can't pick it up and move it somewhere else. It is integrally tied into who we are here in the Bowie community. And as was so lovely stated before, we are all in the same bag and we're in it together. So we hope that, and we expect that you all will continue to carry forward and let them know that we are against this project and that we are against its impact to our communities. This is a novelty train that does not benefit us in any way. The original WBNA, when it was the electric railroad, stopped in Bowie. Many of those stops are historic places. This new train will chisel right through our county. It won't stop. It won't bring us money. It won't bring us visitors. It won't bring us guests. It's just going to rip out our homes and our businesses. How are we supposed to pick that up and move on? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Dubetsky? Mr. Beskey will be followed by Jeff Holdridge. Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening. I spoke at the last meeting as well. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight. It's wonderful to see so many people caring about this. I wonder how many people who are in the audience were actually paid to be here, that it was their job to be here, versus how many of you came here because you care, because this really matters. I'm reminded of an old Janis Ian song, and don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Well, you know what? They're trying to pave our paradise. I live in paradise. My husband and I have a 16-acre horse farm where I conduct my business, but it has some historical significance as well. We have pecan trees that were started as seedlings on Thomas Jefferson's plantation. Our house is 100 years old. We have an old smokehouse and an old ice house. We're listed on the historic registry. We're surrounded by acres of pristine, beautiful land and other horse farms. We all love the idea of decreasing traffic congestion and decreasing the time it takes us to get around places. My question is, how does this project do anything to help us? A train that stops in only 3 places, DC, BWI, and Baltimore, does nothing to help the majority of us on this 40-mile line. The project documentation states that the project will serve the elite business traveler. Are any of us in this room the elite business traveler? Who is that? We're told that it's for someone for whom time is more valuable than money. So how much is a ticket? No one seems to know how much the cost of a ticket is, but it's in the neighborhood of airfare. So can you pay those kinds of prices daily to take this train? How many people are actually going to take this train? How many people need to take this train to make it commercially viable? I keep asking this question, but I don't get any good answers. Before sinking billions of dollars into something, shouldn't we have some answers to these questions? Is there actually a need? So far, no. I feel bad for you that you had to come and do this tonight. You didn't tell us anything. We all know what you've already told us. It's a process. We'd like the process to stop. This is stupid, okay? It's just stupid. I'm hurrying. We know that the track can either go underground, along the ground, or above ground. Underground is super expensive, not that this project is cheap to begin with. We're told that the track is going to be about 50 feet wide. That's what David Henley told us back in July. I'm not making this up. To give you some perspective, 50 feet wide is a 4-lane highway. 4 lanes. That decimates an incredible path, whether it's the WB&A trail, a pasture, wetlands, or your house. How much damage will there be to the tributaries to the bay from construction? Along the ground, it will create a barrier that will effectively separate one side of Bowie from the other. Okay, above ground. Well, it's only about 14 feet. 14 feet is about a 2-story house, okay? Not so high. And 50 feet, or a 4-lane highway. Nothing will ever grow under that. The sun will be blocked out. You might as well be in a tunnel. What does this do to our community? To our farms, our wildlife, our quality of life, for a train that doesn't serve our community? As far as I can tell, there's no commercially viable superconducting maglev train in operation anywhere in the world.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a test track, and they're getting ready to start something in Japan. But do we really want to be a guinea pig for this kind of untried technology? The problem with untried technology is that you don't know if it works. You don't have information about long-term health or environmental consequences. I don't see the point of being a guinea pig for BWRR and TNEM for something that has no benefit to me or my community, has the potential for unintended negative consequences, and seems to have no potential for financial viability. I don't want to see 50-foot tracks rotting along this community when the project fails, nor do I want to bail it out with my tax dollars. I oppose this train.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Holdridge? Can I know you don't want to hear this, but we have a lot of people that want to speak, And when we delay the process, you just keep them here later and later and later. 'Cause we don't want to get these people to speak, and then we want to get some feedback from our visitors tonight. So, you know, if you can keep the conversation moving and then a little less disruption, it would make us all a little better. Mr. Holdridge, maybe followed by Elizabeth Liu. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for hearing me again. I made a presentation in July. It's on the record. I have an updated version of that. I'll email it to you. I'm not going to waste your time with giving it here. But there is some new information that came to my attention after July that I think is worthy of mention here. First of all, the Congressional Research Service did a study, and this is for our federal representative staffs that are in the room. CRS did a study on high-speed rail in the Northeast Corridor in December 2013. It needs to be updated. They looked at maglev, and there's some very interesting information in that report. It says that the cost of building maglev track is $350 million a mile versus the cost of improving the existing Amtrak corridor somewhere between $2.5 and $30 million a mile. Either way, it's at least a tenth of the cost. Okay, so the CRS report needs to be updated. I checked with a colleague of mine there the other day. That's the last one they published. It's an objective source of information and analysis. Something else that I've learned since July is that this is really being driven by the federal government. Even if this Bowie City Council votes to vehemently oppose the project, I'm not sure you can stop it. So we all need to talk to our federal representatives, our senators, our representatives in Congress, and talk to them about this, because this was started by a federal law that was passed that said that there should be a study of maglev. And then the Federal Railroad Administration put out a grant on a Federal Register notice saying you have to study maglev. So you can't blame the people from the state for studying maglev. They took the money. Maybe you can blame them for taking the money. But the money was made available only for studying maglev. So you may remember from my July presentation, I said, how come we didn't look at all the alternatives? Well, the federal government didn't give any money for looking at alternatives. So that needs to be done, and this is a matter of federal policy as well as state policy. I don't know that local communities can do that much about it. You know, per the comments that Senator Benson made, you know, it isn't just a Bowie issue, it's not just a Prince George's County issue, it's a Maryland issue and it's a national issue. And this is because of the comment that Aviva made is right on the money, because if this is not economically viable, it's going to fall on the taxpayers. We're going to end up with a railroad to nowhere, or we're going to end up with having to subsidize some private railroad that wasn't economically viable in the first place. So those are my comments on updates, but I'd like to respond to a couple things that Mr. Smith said. First of all, we did have a very productive dialogue with Mr. Truschler, and I don't understand why he's here. Can you explain why Mr. Truschler is not here?
I understand Mr. Truschler no longer works for the organization.
Okay, well, that's a surprise, because it was sprung on us at the last minute. I heard you quote a letter from the Secretary of Transportation that says we will only use existing right-of-ways. Sounds like the WB&A's already been chosen. Is that right? Is that what you guys are hearing? Because that's the existing right-of-way. Otherwise, it's Amtrak or Parkway, and we know that they don't want to use either of those. Okay. So, you know, I was very surprised to see Mr. Smith showing a BWRR slide, and I think there were some comments earlier from our elected representatives that there's clearly a separation between the private railroad and the state government's role in this. At the end of his presentation, he said, we have a website. That's a private website. It's a website for a private company. We have a website? That was surprising to me. So I wanted to go back to the presentation that was made by BWRR here back in July, which is Mr. Henley was very complimentary at the end of the meeting about all the comments that he got from the community, and he said that we were going to get responses and clarifications to that in writing. Has the City Council received any responses or clarifications in writing?
We've received a number of things, yes.
Yes?
We have just recently got some data back.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, maybe you can make those a matter of public record.
That will all become on the city's website.
Okay. So I won't take too much more of your time.
Okay.
Yeah, where is this purpose need statement that was
I'm sorry?
mentioned, you said that there was a statement that was of purpose and need that was put out at the April meetings? So we haven't seen that. And then the other thing I found very surprising in my last point is that in the discussion of the process, there was no mention of the final scoping report that was released in May. Has that report been withdrawn? Because we all read the report and we thought it was pretty seriously flawed, and you didn't mention it as one of the things that happened after April. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth Liu? Ms. Liu, Elizabeth Liu? Oh, welcome. And Ms. Liu will be followed by Bruce Millam. Welcome, ma'am.
Hey, good evening. My name is Elizabeth Liu Vinich, and I'm a Bowie citizen residing in the Rockledge section of Bowie since 1983. To begin, I bought my rental house on Rocky Spring Lane in Bowie in 1983 and have been living there ever since. Over the years, I have had many opportunities to buy a new home and move somewhere else, but I love my quiet and treated neighborhood, my nice neighbors, great city services, and easy access to Washington, D.C., Annapolis, Baltimore, and BWI Airport. This is the place I call home. Like many of my neighbors and friends, I have worked hard, paid my bills on time, maintained my property, and tried hard to build my nest egg. Just within the last 3 years, I spent a lot of my saving to upgrade and maintain my home. I know many of us living in Bowie have renovated and expanded our homes because we need more living space, but we do not want to leave our wonderful neighborhoods. Now, with much surprise, we have learned that a Japanese-engineered maglev train project is coming through Maryland to WDC with no stops between these two cities except BWI Airport. And some of the proposed 6 tracks will cut through our neighborhoods and destroy our homes and our well-established communities. Like many of my neighbors, I plan to retire here and live at my house as long as I can. This unproven maglev project gives me great concern and fear that one day I will be forced out of my home under eminent domain, lose the home equity I have built up and worked so hard for, and then have no place to go as I cannot afford the current home prices and the associated moving expenses. And if I choose to sell my house now, who would pay me for the fair market value, knowing we are facing such a terrible situation? I'm sure many of my neighbors are facing the same problems and having similar worries. Many of us are retirees, and some of us will not be able to qualify for a new mortgage loan. And it is also our common sentiment that even if maglev pays us top dollar to buy our properties, we just do not want to move anywhere else. These are our homes and our sanctuaries. We like living here. Any of the citizens that are from the Rockledge, Whitehall, Stonybrook, Glendale, Red Willow, High Bridge, stand up. Let them see who we are. Thank you. Okay. Now, many times neighbors and friends ask me if the government would pay them the fair market value for the homes under eminent domain. The truth is, our government does not have to pay us what we think our homes are worth. Buying and moving into another home is a very expensive business and should not be forced upon us. We should not be kicked out of our homes, whether one is old or young. And we do not like to have things done behind our backs. Particularly, we were not informed of the scoping studies that took place in November and December last year, in the midst of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And the public's response period was all over by early January 2017. We homeowners here were given no respect. We did not like this treatment a bit. In addition, the magnet project is negatively affecting my local business. I have been a licensed real estate agent in the state of Maryland for over 32 years. My major market areas are in Bowie, Glendale, Lanham, Crofton, Odenton areas. Under the law, knowing what I know now, I may have to disclose this fact that the magnet project is coming.
If you could wrap up your comments, please.
Yes. But once I disclose these facts to buy, who would buy my house? Okay? So, we have a dark cloud hanging over our heads and over our properties until this magnet project is completely defeated. Otherwise, we will always have a tough time selling our homes as more and more people are becoming aware of this project through the media and through words of mouth. We would be damned if we don't disclose, and we will be damned if we do, because there could be serious legal consequences.
Okay. All right, I have to close it off now so I can get the next speaker up. Okay?
I'm not done yet. The best part. Okay, just give me 2 more minutes. Sometime within the past several years, our government passed a law for it to be able to take our properties under eminent domain and then pass the land to private entities for the common good. Now, can you imagine that our government take the land of the U.S. citizens and then pass them on to the hands of foreign government and their companies and their investors? Now, how screwed up can this be? And what about President Trump's slogan, Make in America? Well, in closing, I respectfully ask the City Council and the Mayor to make a public stand to vote a big no for this project to stop it from cutting through our communities and through the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Bruce Millen. Welcome. Mr. Will be followed by Dawn Wampler. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Mr. Robinson. My name is Bruce Milam. I've lived in Bowie in 4 separate locations over the past 33 years. It's my personal concern that this project is bad for Bowie, bad for PG County and the state of Maryland. And if implemented, it will adversely affect the home and property values in Bowie. The project creates risks that numerous properties, including mine, are at risk of adverse possession or hostile taking of the property, wiping out a significant portion of my nest egg. The mag-led project is of no benefit to the citizens of Bowie. This is the information age, and plans and information about the project have not been provided in sufficient detail to the citizens of Bowie. The scoping report does not mention the predominantly negative comments at the April Community Center meeting in Bowie, nor any of our specific comments. Comments from the citizens of Bowie were ignored. The train would be a one-of-a-kind prototype. The effect of the magnetic and electric fields strong enough to lift a train on people and animals not unknown. The acoustic waves, pulses as the train passes, what that'll do to our houses, that's completely unknown. The project does not have a business model that closes with ticket sales, so it'll end up in the laps of the federal and state government, and we'll eventually have to pay for it with our tax dollars like these other private-public activities. The toll road that's out past towards Leesburg, same thing happened there. The trolleys in D.C., that'll fall onto tax dollars. We'll end up paying for it. The only people who make any money off of it is the developers and the people that initially work on it. Transportation infrastructure is a zero-sum game, where the money from MagLev will take away from funds for our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, airport, ports, and existing rail. MagLev will hurt our infrastructure. MagLev has limited stops, no benefit to Bowie or the people in the state. Currently, the WNL Trail is a tremendous asset to Bowie and a big plus for the homeowners living nearby. Several thousand people enjoy the trail each year. Children learn to ride bikes, hear an owl for the first time, watch herons in Horsepen Branch, watch deer, see hawks, and watch bald eagles fly. The last train on the WBNA was in 1935, 82 years ago. This sliver of land has been used for recreation for 4 generations. This train is predominantly proposed above ground. What a spectacular crash with cars flying through the air into our neighborhoods. This would be like NASCAR on steroids with an accident. The maglev train would be like a linear trash dump through our community, completely out of character with the extensive tree canopy in Bowie. The maglev train makes no sense for our transportation infrastructure, the nature, the environment, our farms, our real estate values, or the city of Bowie. It would affect or displace thousands. Those opposed to the maglev project, please stand up. Thank you. To the mayor, council, and those watching at home, let's fight to protect the WB&A Trail and surrounding homes, the crown jewel of Bowie, our home, the place we love. Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Thank you, sir. John Wempler. John Wempler. Joan Glenn. Oh, there, I'm sorry. Good, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. We really appreciate the time and the attention you're giving to this project. I know the meetings go long. We appreciate that. My name is Dawn Wampler. Tonight, I'm actually here to speak on behalf of a longtime Bowie resident who, though he has been out of the country, has done his best to keep abreast of this project. Mr. Al Bauman has been a Bowie resident for 41 years. Neither his house nor his neighborhood are within the current alternative routes for the SC maglev train. But as a citizen of Bowie, he is very concerned about the impact that this project will have on our city and on our county. If you look at the path of the yellow line, you can see that it plows through a major portion of the R and the W sections of Bowie, affecting a large number of houses, mostly older Levitt-built homes. At an open house in April, we were told that the lines shown on the map were representative of a 1,000-foot swath. The rail line would be built within that 1,000-foot swath, but the exact placement would not be known until later. That information has continued to be clarified to indicate that the rail itself would require 50 feet and would be accompanied by an additional 50 feet of acquired property by the owner-operator of the rail line, making the portion taken by the project to be a total of a 100-foot swath. It's difficult to imagine that a project of this size will only affect a 100-foot wide area, considering the size of the construction equipment and the materials that are going to be needed to bring in for the project. I will reiterate Aviva's example just for perspective. Our interstate highways use a standard of 12 feet as a standard width per lane. This means that the rails and supporting structure would roughly be the equivalent of a 4-lane interstate highway, with eminent domain or the easement taking twice that much. The number of homes in Bowie that would be directly affected by a construction zone of this magnitude will change the face of our community. The same holds true for every community that lies along the proposed 40-mile route of the SC maglev. You know the neighborhoods that would be affected by this project. They are usually young families with children who know that Bowie is a great place to raise kids, or older folks who have already raised their families and have been in their homes for decades. Can you imagine the emotional impact on these hundreds, possibly thousands of folks to have their homes destroyed and their lives uprooted for the purpose of providing a few elite passengers the opportunity to save a half hour on their commute time from DC to Baltimore? And what about the residents whose homes are just outside the affected area? Our understanding is there have been no long-term studies on the physical effects of folks who live near one of these high-powered trains, so any risks to them is unknown. In addition to the upheaval of families being forced out of their homes and the significant population decrease in the city, hundreds of thousands of dollars will be lost in tax revenues. Additionally, the population decrease will cause Bowie businesses to lose sales and make it more challenging for the city to attract businesses to fill vacant commercial spaces. These comments have focused on Bowie, but the points I'm making tonight apply to all the affected areas. There is absolutely no benefit to any community in Prince George's or Anne Arundel counties. The impact that the taking of residences, businesses, parks, schools, churches, and whatever else is in the way is too high a price to pay for an expensive, disruptive project with no benefit to any local communities or counties. Yes, we need better transportation, and yes, it will take huge sums of money, but we must provide transportation services to benefit our whole communities, and not waste time and our dollars on projects with such limited benefit as the SC Maglev. Thank you.
Welcome, ma'am. And Ms. Glenn will be followed by Dennis Brady. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Public involvement is the cornerstone of the National Environmental Policy Act, and agencies like the Maryland Transit Administration and the Federal Railroad Administration are required by law to take steps to actively engage the people and the public in a meaningful way. MTA has failed to do this on the Maglev project. MTA held scoping meetings between Thanksgiving and Christmas of last year. They sent out only 669 postcards announcing those meetings, despite the fact that thousands of people live within the study areas for this project. MTA ran newspaper ads, but not in the Bowie Blade and not in the Washington Post. And MTA hung posters out for the project, but none were hung in Bowie or our neighboring communities of Crofton, Piney Orchard, Odenton, or Severn. Because of this, we did not know about these meetings and didn't have the opportunity to comment. In fact, at the one meeting held in Prince George's County, 18 people attended. Please take a look around. Far more than 18 people would have attended had we known about these meetings. It's not because we didn't care, it's because we didn't know. MTA has received numerous requests to reopen the scoping period for this project so that we have the opportunity to adequately comment on the scope of the environmental impact statement and the alternatives to be studied. We have received no response from MTA. In April, again, with little notice to affected communities, MTA held public meetings that they deemed purpose and need meetings. While there was a display board at that's available online, that gives the purpose of the Maglev project, no information was presented on the need for the project. We very much want to understand why Maglev is needed and why it alone can solve this unknown problem. Because while the need for the project was not presented at the purpose and need meeting, preliminary alternatives were presented, and screening criteria was presented that was used to narrow alternatives. The screening criteria did not take into consideration impacts to communities, including impacts to residential areas, businesses, schools, churches, etc. Fatal flaws, per MTA, were limited to construction and operational issues and impacts to the natural and cultural environment. Again, impacts to communities were irrelevant and not considered. In the areas of natural and cultural resources, MDA decided and announced at that April meeting that the yellow or WB&A alternative has only medium impacts to natural and cultural resources. They made this determination despite the fact that detailed studies have not yet been conducted. Lastly, the National Environmental Policy Act requires that agencies consider a range of alternatives, including alternatives that are outside the purview of the agency conducting the review. MTA has failed to do this. By limiting the purpose of the project to the construction of a Maglev train and Maglev only, MTA has limited alternatives to only those that support this specific technology. It was interesting earlier tonight to hear comments that made it sound as if Maglev was a done deal. We were just looking at which alternative, which alignment. But not only are the alternatives restricted, but the technology is proprietary to one supplier, and the construction and operation of the train is limited to one private company, BWRR. MTA should not be beholden to BWRR. As a state agency, MTA should be working for the citizens of Maryland. But last week, Mr. Henley of BWRR came to a citizen meeting uninvited and unannounced. In his statement to the citizens at that meeting, Mr. Henley indicated that at tonight's City Council meeting, we may hope to hear real information, that's a direct quote, but MTA would only be speaking to the process and would not provide information on alternatives. Again, alternatives were presented in April, so I'm not sure why we couldn't get information. At the very worst, Mr. Henley was telling us that our attendance at tonight's meeting was a waste of our time. At the very least, Mr. Henley's statement indicated that BWRR and MTA are closely coordinating the project studies and public message for this project. This seriously calls MTA's independence into question. If MTA will not look out for us, it is imperative that the citizens and our City Council speak out loudly against this project and speak for the future of Bowie, Prince George's County, and the state of Maryland.
Amen. Thank you. Next speaker is Dennis Brady. Mr. Brady? Darrell Carrington? Oh, okay, Mr. Brady. And the next speaker will be Darrell Carrington.
Evening, Council. Glad to be back. In more ways than one. I was here talking and presenting at the July 10th, and my opposition to this program has not changed. I'm an engineer by training and by experience. Nearly 44 years, both technical and engineering, 34 in the nuclear industry. I know that this project could be built. Technically, it's doable. That doesn't mean it should be done. We were disappointed to hear that Mr. Truschler was canned on Friday. He appeared to be reaching out to citizens who contacted him and talked to him. So we wonder what happened there. We have issues with the independence of MTA with regards to BWRR, and I think we saw that tonight. We had the newest member of the BWRR team come up here as part of state's presentation, it appeared, so we wonder about their independence. We feel that the process to date has been abysmal. They have failed to do real, true outreach to the citizens. You have a 41-mile route, about 10 miles wide. We heard that they sent out about a little over 600 postcards, mainly in Baltimore and DC, ignoring Prince George's and Anne Arundel County. And in Prince George's, out of the 6 lines, that had identified, that we've identified 19,000 properties, which means property owners. In Anne Arundel County, you're talking about 3,000 properties and property owners. And very little outreach was given. And we hear they're going to have 5 meetings coming up. I think that's woefully inadequate. They should have a meeting in Severn. They should have a meeting in Piney Orchard. They should have a meeting in Bowie. They should have a meeting in Glen Arden, in Glendale. In Prince George's, I think there are potentially 11 municipalities that are impacted or close enough that they should be advised and consulted. They need to go to all these elected officials and brief them and inform their citizens of what's going on. We've constantly asked questions and raised issues, and very little information is coming back to us. And what they have shown us is very limited as far as the details, and it reminds me of the Impressionist movement of a century ago. Monet and his water lilies. You had to really look hard because it was obscured, it was fuzzy. And we really think that the proponents are doing that on purpose, so that the citizens don't see the real picture. But that whole movement required people to look more closely at what the artist was rendering, what they were painting, to see the real story, and that's what we've been doing as a citizens group. We were accused of grossly misrepresenting and passing out misinformation by their representative who interrupted an HOA meeting last Monday. I'm proud of the quality of the people in this group that has formed to educate the public, something that MTA is not doing, something that BWRR is not doing. We have people who are experienced in federal procurement issues. We have people who are experienced in NEPA. We have engineers who are experienced, PhDs and scientists. It's a good group, and they're raising the tough questions that we're not getting answers to. Our research has found that very few of the systems around the world are successful, and those that are running seem to be based upon substantial subsidies from the government, which means the taxpayers in Maryland will be funding the operational expense of this if it moves forward. Many have failed or have been abandoned in the planning process. And there's a significant economic risk if this moves forward and fails to the community and to the state. The scoping phase was flawed. It leads into the parameters that the NEPA process will look at and evaluate and question and check. They were woefully inadequate in the outreach, and they have refused our repeated requests to reopen so that more people who learn of it can put their questions and their concerns for consideration in the final product. I was reminded recently that this is actually the third version of maglev to come forward. I was reminded by a former county council representative that the idea of a maglev came around 1989, 1990, surfaced and it went away. And then 2002, 2003, when I was on the council with you, Fred, it came up. And actually, at that time, they were proposing following the Amtrak route all the way up to Baltimore, or as close as they could get, and it seemed reasonable. And now we learn they can't do that. A previous comment was made. The letter said that it would be limited to existing right-of-way. And guess what? The WB&A is a substantial right-of-way that comes right down through our community and is very likely, and that is shown as the yellow line. And let me step back real quickly. The last time we were here, and I said, with my comments, I talked about the worst-case scenario, and we talked then about the 1,000-foot taking. Well, we learned that that was wrong, and we've modified. We're now talking about 100-foot, somewhere in that 1,000-foot. And actually, those maps are damn good. Our GIS guy took their maps and tagged the center and then went out in his program 500 feet on either side. So they are accurate. And I found it a little disingenuous, the comment about the fact that, oh, some of them, you can't lay them overside, so you got the red and the yellow side by side, and they're really not intended. But when you get closer to Baltimore and you get closer to DC, they all start converging. So there's no reason, if you're someone who does topology, someone who does maps, there's no reason to have those lines overlay. So don't hold us responsible if we misanalyze that because you didn't do it correctly. Two more comments, and then I'll be done, Mr. Mayor. It was commented about the purpose and needs. They had a strong statement for the purpose, but they had zero for needs. This is not needed, it's not justified, and we seem to be picking up a head of steam when there is no need for it. And the final thing I'll say, and this is kind of interesting, and I'll read it in its entirety, but it's just 2 sentences though, Fred. On or after July 1, 2005, the state may not spend any funds from any source for the purpose of studying, developing, or constructing a maglev system in the state. This is part of Senate Bill 508. It was adopted in April of 2004, and it's my understanding that that law is still on the books. So I'm wondering how they are spending any money, since they said that they are receiving the money for the environmental studies because BWRR cannot, as a private entity, take it. Well, this law says you can't do that. On top of that, the payment of salaries and benefits for the state employees that are working on the maglev are violating this law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carrington? Mr. Carrington will be followed by Gerald Bilski. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having me this evening, and thank you for your indulgence. It's been a very long day for everyone. But I think it's a testament to how important this issue is, to how many people are still here at this very late hour. I like to say how proud I am to be a part of the group of citizens who have come out and actually have been much more informative and has given this council better information than unfortunately we've received from our state partners. And I'm very disappointed that yet again, they are not here with answers to questions that we asked over a month ago. Actually 2 months ago. I am very impressed with you, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of the council folks, as well as our state elected officials who have all now stood up and said, no, we will not support this project. I think that that's remarkable that our citizens were able to move you to that position very, very quickly. And again, I'm very proud of the folks that are with us. As Mr. Brady said, we have PhDs, engineers, people who work government relations and the like. It's very hard to pull the wool over our eyes. We're educated. We live in this community. We love this community. We've been here. I've been here for 16 years, and I'm considered one of the new kids on my block. I am. I mean, I think there's only one other neighbor in my neighborhood that has been there less time than I have. So people not only raise their families, but then their kids move to other parts of Bowie. And it must be the leadership of our mayor that, makes people do that, right, sir? I'd like to also add that I'm a little disappointed that we continue to spend federal money in this reckless fashion. If what our understanding is true, they've already had federal grants that they have spent to study this issue, and now we're talking another $27.8 million that went into studying this issue yet again. Again, I know the time is late. I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said, but I'd like to thank you for the leadership you've shown, and I would like to also say to Senator Benson, we're going to need your help and your leadership working with our federal partners. Your long-standing record working with our federal partners is well documented, and we will need that support. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Mr. Belsky? Mr. Belsky will be followed by Martin Glazer. Welcome, sir.
Yes, hello. My name is Gerald Belsky. I represent the Linden LaRouche PAC. And the viewpoint that I want to present is totally at variance with everything I've heard. The idea that you cannot pull the wool over most people's eyes, I think is wrong, because I think it has been pulled over most people's eyes in this room. The maglev technology is actually part of a revolution in the world, which is going on right now, which will change the United States. And this technology is being applied along with high-speed, conventional high-speed rail and other new forms of infrastructure, and it's called the New Silk Road, which people in my organization helped devise, which China is now building and has invited the United States to join. And yes, China is building maglev along with high-speed rail, and so is Japan. The reason why we need new technology is our infrastructure has collapsed. And when you talk about economic viability, we've been bailing out Wall Street for the last 8 years, and during that time period, China has been building new advanced infrastructure, which has rebuilt their economy. Now, they are inviting the United States to join. On the question of economic viability, the idea that maglev would take away from other forms of infrastructure is preposterous, because we haven't been building any new forms of infrastructure. Just look at Houston. We're not building flood control, water projects. All of this is going to cost a lot of money. Now the question is, where is this money going to come from? And what we are putting forward, the LaRouche movement this week in Congress, is that President Trump is going to have to implement 4 laws. The first one he posed during the campaign, which is Glass-Steagall. That is, you're going to have to break up the bailout of the speculative banks and direct the money into building massive forms of infrastructure. Now, that would include rebuilding flood control. It would mean new forms of transportation. Now, the maglev project here, I think you have to look at it in a different way. It's simply a demonstration project for what should go on across the country in terms of all forms of infrastructure. We should have maglev all over the United States along with conventional high-speed rail. We're not going to simply fix up the old tracks. That's not going to work. Now, I do agree with one of the speakers previously who said that public-private partnerships have failed. That's actually true. You're going to have to finance these projects with a national bank. And this is the secret, a credit system that Alexander Hamilton first developed at the founding of the country. Lincoln built the Transcontinental Railroad with a credit system he called greenbacks, and the federal government gave credit to build the railroads. Roosevelt, FDR, did this in the 1930s with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. We're going to have to build big infrastructure projects. And the maglev system is simply a demonstration. It shouldn't just be viewed as a local project. This should be part of a national plan, and that is what we're calling on President Trump to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Martin Glazer. Mr. Glazer. Okay. Kathleen McGinnis. Welcome, ma'am. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. In the interest of being brief, I really shortened my PowerPoint.
If it's brief.
It is very brief. Okay. I originally wanted to talk about the failure of maglev throughout the United States. Basically, all the projects have been shut down or they failed, mostly because of funding and acquiring right-of-way. Interestingly, Atlanta has one that's still kind of on the books. It hasn't really been discussed, but they have found that following an already established route along an interstate was the most efficient way to construct and the most inexpensive way to construct maglev. And of course, the Baltimore-Washington maglev is the most expensive of all the projects that have been proposed in the United States. One of the things that SC Maglev has consistently said is that this would be a greening project, that it would reduce emissions. And I'm just starting to find out that, of course, construction will have an extremely high amount of greenhouse gas emissions because of the kind of equipment that would be used. But most electricity in this area comes from fossil fuels, and we'll have an increase in use of electricity. It's going to come from fossil fuels that emanate greenhouse gases. So it kind of refutes some of their information. But basically, I want to say that maglev requires proprietary and specialized infrastructure. The construction and maintenance costs are going to be much greater than any other kind of high-speed rail, which should be investigated. The environmental benefits of maglev are questionable due to the source of clean electricity used to run the trains, which is fossil fuels. Other jurisdictions have recognized the ridership estimates may not be viable, and somebody brought up China. China is finding that the only people who really ride maglev in Shanghai are Europeans and Americans, that the actual people who ride the train are the citizens prefer to use the subway. It's less expensive. It gets them where they need to be, not drops them at a terminus that they have to find additional transportation to and from, and it's much less expensive. The other jurisdictions in the United States that have studied maglev have also found that the estimates are just not viable. Florida actually went with the light rail option mostly because they couldn't come to terms with the expense of the tickets for their riders. And the need for future government subsidies couldn't be discounted. I have a whole thing about JR talk, but that thing is very scary because the Japanese government, the Prime Minister has actually tasked JR Toke with helping their economy grow because, or by selling the equipment. And BWR considers this route, or is considered to be the open door for future purchases in the United States. Somebody brought up the whole idea of this is a federal project, and there's a lot of, we're kind of looking in the wrong direction. And I would suggest we follow the money and start looking at the campaign donations that were made to some of our federal politicians, like Mr. Cardin and like Anthony Brown, by BWRR in this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good to see you. Chris Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt here. Dustin Kuzan. Welcome, sir. Our newest committee member.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dustin Kuzan. I am in Bowie Forest. I'm several miles from the, about 3 miles probably from the furthest south line. And so I'm really not directly impacted, but tonight I'm here to stand in arms with my fellow neighbors against this project for several reasons. One, I just, I'd like to point out that this, as many, I don't want to rehash a lot of things that people said, but the WB&A trail is a huge asset to this community, something that we've been fighting for decades, and something that we're continue to fight for now that we're hoping that will be completed decades from now. And it brings a lot of economic growth to the city in terms of tourism along the trail. And when that connection is made, it's going to bring even more tourism to the trail. When it makes that connection between Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County, county across the river. So this is something that a community asset that brings a sense of place to the community, a sense of peace and tranquility, and we're going to put a train line through there. This is, and for this, what is this benefit for? It's, and it's not even an issue of proximity to the location of the stations, that people in DC, 99% of the people even right around the stations aren't going to benefit from this. The price point is going to be so high. This is going to be higher than the Excella from DC to Baltimore. So this is only going to benefit the business elite. And so pretty much everyone in this building is not going to benefit from this project, and yet we're going to see an impact to our community. I think we need to be very strong and diligent on fighting this project to preserve our community, and recognize that this is a project that's going to only maybe benefit 1% of the entire, not only Bowie, but also our neighbors in Glen Arden, our neighbors in all of Maryland, and this is just a starting point of the impacts of what this is going to go all the way up to New York City. And disturbing the trail affects the East Coast Greenway, which is a national trail system that people all the way down in Florida have been trying to build. So we need to be advocates for not just the city of Bowie, but also the entire country to make sure that this project doesn't get built. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Colleen Merkel? Colleen Merkel? Merkel? Oh, good. Oh, good to see you. It should be followed by Brian Blodgett. Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me a couple minutes of your time. I'm wearing two hats here. As a Bowie resident, I live on a farm. My husband's family has been on that farm for over 100 years, and this project would greatly impact one of the few remaining farms left in Bowie. But my other hat is as an environmental professional, and I just want to reiterate some of the things that I've heard already. The NEPA process, the scoping was not well advertised, as has been said. It should have been advertised, it should have been promoted, as Joan had pointed out. The purpose and need statement, again, as many people have said, the need is not there. And when NEPA documents are prepared, particularly for transportation projects, one of the studies that are done to justify that is a feasibility study and a needs analysis. And I've looked high and low for that information and that data, and I've not seen it. That should be presented in the NEPA document. And the alternatives are also are not well defined. And I would really like to encourage the state to, before you present the draft document, before you even get there, I would really like to recommend that you present what we do in Department of Defense, and that is we prepare a description of proposed action and alternatives first. That presents your purpose and need, and it presents your alternatives. That is the foundation of the document, and if you don't get that right, the rest of the document won't be right. So I would really highly recommend that you present to the public that portion of the NEPA document before you go any further. So that's all I have to say. Just know that you have residents here who understand the NEPA process very well. It is an umbrella document that also has to address all the other environmental laws and regulations, which we are also familiar with. And there's also something called the Administrative Procedures Act. So if the process is not followed correctly, that means you also violate the Administrative Procedures Act, and there can be legal ramifications for that too. So just know you've got people who understand the process.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. Brian Blodgett. Welcome. Brian will be followed by Bob Schoeneman. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and all of the present. My concern deals with not only with the citizens of Bowie, Odenton, and all other communities that would be impacted by the location of the potential routes, both economically and in all the manners, but also about the passengers on the maglev. I'm concerned about the security that Delegate Valentino Smith mentioned in her very brief statement. NEPA, created in the 1970s, did not have security in its charter. But nearly 50 years later, after the implementation of NEPA, security is a real issue today. It could not have been foreseen at that time. I am questioning what will be put in place to prevent an attack using explosives, utilizing simple things such as a bomb, or more sophisticated explosives using portable missiles or rockets. Will the train and the entire maglev infrastructure be protected against these types of attacks? And how would this protection impact the local citizens along the entire route? Also, how will this maglev be a magnet for terrorists and other individuals who desire to harm the United States of America? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Bob Schoeneman. Yeah, Mr. Schoeneman will be followed by the penultimate speaker. That will be Peter Granahan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I only have a couple of main themes that I'd like to work on here. Number one is the amount of money we're spending on this research progress. It was a very wise thing for Congress to do, but it's gone astray since Congress's original intention. The problem that I see here is I see signs saying, stop the maglev train. Maglev is a technology that doesn't necessarily mean it's overhead. It doesn't necessarily mean it's superconducting. Maglev is a very good technology, and someday we will have tunnels that run maglev trains, and they'll be between Baltimore and Maryland, or DC and Baltimore. They're going to run up and down the East Coast. I would say, I'm just guessing now, but about a decade or so. The way I look at the Acela today, Acela is going to become a commuter high-speed train, nothing more. So the tunnels will go between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, underground the complete way. Just to give you an example, the Japanese train is about $100 billion. It's about $300 million a mile. You can build a 12-foot diameter tunnel like they did for the Super Collider, $4 million a mile. So you can build a small diameter tunnel, and that's all you need for a train, or a serial train. Now, the other thing that really worries me, the large number of people here who don't have access to enough information, and I have looked for information, and one thing that I really see missing is the statement of work. It's just unavailable, basically, and it's unforgivable. Now, because we are working on a contract that's like $28 million, It's pretty obvious from all the testimony you've seen here today that we're not going to have this overhead maglev train. It's just not going to happen. That's number one, because no one's going to put up with it. And number two, the money's not going to be there. Has anybody looked at the finances lately? You know, we're not going to get $1 trillion infrastructure bill because we can't even afford to pay for the disaster down here in Texas. So the money's not there, and someday the money will get there, but it'll get there in small steps. And I think that the first thing they're going to do is build a tunnel between Washington and Baltimore. And the intention is that will be up and down the eastern seaboard. It's up and down the eastern seaboard. So that kind of an infrastructure that the nation does need, and I really support that. So I just want to close out by saying that maglev is a good thing, and let's not denigrate it. If by putting SC in front of it, you know, $300 million a mile, 35 diameter tunnels, it's ridiculous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Peter Hernandez? And he is the penultimate speaker, which means he is next to last. And Mr. Wolfrey holds that distinct pleasure. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Most of us feel very left out in this process, and this is the only group that's listened to us. And thank you very much, and I hope you can be a lot of help. Mine has to do with questions that I sent to Mr. Trushler and talked with him briefly. I'm surprised he's not here today. You all have copies of this. I'm just going to review some of the questions. He was not going to speak to any of the financial questions. He says his area is really the environmental part of it, which I think is the most important to most of us. Basically, the first question was, who in Maryland would use this train between Washington, BWI, and Baltimore? To me, I don't know. It will take too much time to travel to BWI to take this train to Washington, and that makes no sense. It would take more time, not less, and it would cost more money. So I don't know anybody who's going to use it. We have a lot of alternatives right now that I think work much better. I definitely will not be using it because there's no need. Next question was, is the protection of our homes, businesses, religious centers, schools, communities, personal property, recreational facilities, lifestyle, property value, the top priority in selecting a route? If not, don't do it. Who's going to be responsible for, who's liable for the $5 billion loan from the Bank of Japan? I don't know. Okay. Asked about the environmental impact, the construction runoff, and financial resources impact on the train, of this train on the Chesapeake Bay, removing the potential disastrous backup of silt on the Conewago Dam, restoring the bay, seafood industry, recreational fishing, crabs, oysters, and rockfish. You know, we need to look at alternatives, and Chesapeake Bay is a much higher priority than this train. Why did most of us only hear about this proposed train 3 months after the 170-page final scoping report was completed with almost no participation from citizens? Somebody already mentioned that there was only 18 people went to the one meeting in Prince George's County, and that got 2 comments from the group. I think we got a lot more comments from the citizens in this area. And the scoping report, the process in the report were fatally flawed. The report has no value. should be discarded, and the scoping process done again after open, honest disclosure of the potential impacts of this project on the citizens of Maryland. And you'd get a lot of people showing up for a meeting where you tell people what's going on first, so they can ask some intelligent questions. We were not informed about this train project, the meetings, or the scoping process. There were many ways to contact us. Newspaper articles, newspaper inserts, mailing list, state land records, religious institutions, radio and TV, government distributions. We were just kept in the dark. And I'd hate to think that it was deliberate, but we were excluded. And how many people saw all these different postcards and all of this? I don't know anybody who has, because I sure didn't. Okay. Have you released the pro forma evaluation documents for this project? Which is basically just the financial projections. They have them, they just haven't released them. And also they should do it for the Washington to New York. A big question is, who will own the technology, manufacture the trains, the maglev, operating components, operating systems, parts, and jobs? What happened to build American, buy American, and American jobs? This isn't even considered. That's a shame.
Could I ask you to start wrapping up, Peter? I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm sorry about taking too much time. Who will pay for with $100 billion cost for this system to Washington to New York, Japan, or the United States? I guarantee it'll be the United States. And without going through all of the questions, finally, why should we consider this test project in Maryland? And I agree with almost every one of the speakers here, and they've made very good points. Thank you very much for representing us, and good luck. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you. And the speaker that gets the Patience and Endurance Award.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council
Mr.
members.
Wolfley, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Council members, a pleasure to be here again this evening. I want to talk to you a little bit. The good news about being a former councilman is I understand I have unlimited time to talk. So that's really nice. And being last is, the good news about being last is there are fewer people to bore, so I will try and keep it down as short as I can. I want to talk a little bit about process as opposed to some of the arguments that have been made, which are all very valid and justifiable. But first I want to start by thanking all of you for your support. All right, let's see. There we go. Is that any better? Yeah. All right, okay. Somebody. Oh, my name is DeFore Wolfley. Thank you. So I'd like to start off by thanking you all individually. We know that you spent a lot of time here this evening, and there's still more to go. But I'd like to thank you for your opposition that you've all expressed. However, I would like to suggest that it's time for the city to go one step forward and record as an organization the opposition to this proposal. And I think it carries some weight and it sets the tone, and it would be good if at some point in time, maybe the next session or two, that we have a resolution that's brought up and voted on to demonstrate our entire commitment to opposing this. Furthermore, I'd like to suggest as a next step that the city take a leadership role in advocating on behalf of our citizens. More specifically, the city needs to hire a dedicated resource to act as our lobbyist/project manager to represent our interests in this matter. And And it's not just it's in this matter and this matter alone. We do have lobbyists that work for us. They help us in things, whether it's zoning authority or revenue or water sewer system grants, things along those lines. But I think that the gravity of this situation here is sufficient to warrant a dedicated resource for this purpose. We need someone with expertise in transportation, as well as the environmental and economic impacts of a project of this nature. Someone that is more fully capable to present the concerns raised by the maglev project. And I think we've heard a lot of it here this evening, but I think it would be good to get someone to kind of orchestrate that from all parts of the community. Most importantly, the individual also needs to orchestrate the efforts of our elected city, state, county officials, which we've heard this evening as well, our neighboring communities, our affected homeowners. All of these people need to be included in this, and it's clear that there's no one else that's interested in doing that. Perhaps, when it comes to lobbying, you might have an opportunity to ask BWRR about their lobbying activities. I know they are out there and they're hiring people. And I know that they're engaged trying to influence the decision makers, and we ought to be in the same and equal footing. Finally, the federal government, state government, private sector enterprises, environmental agencies, train vendors, and even the Japanese government are working in a concerted effort to push this through. Meanwhile, I feel we are each fighting our individual battles on our individual realms. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone has the same shared goal, but I don't think there's a cohesive, coordinated effort to bring this to the conclusion which we're looking for, which is obviously to stop this effort. So before it's too late, I'd like to suggest that the city provide leadership resources to successfully stop this at the earliest stage that we can. Again, thank you all very much for the time. You've endured a lot this evening, and we're not even finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right. Thank you all. We have 30-some-odd speakers, and I really appreciate, the tenor and the civility and the process. So you guys, we'll go down the row of the council and see if they have some succinct observations and comments to make. I'll start with the end down District 1, since I guess as much of this as any is in your district. Welcome, Mr. Estev, you're on.
Yeah, the NEPA and the federal government decided to prevent me from sleeping this year, so thanks for that. And I appreciate all of my colleagues' diligence and attention on this project. And I'm really grateful to Senator Peters, Delegate Valentino-Smith, Delegate Valerio, Delegate Marvin Holmes, Councilman Turner, and all those who came out tonight and spoke. I'm very, very happy that on this particular project we are all, I think, on the same page, and we are speaking with one voice, and that's very important. And I think similar things could be said for our federal elected officials as well. So I appreciate your being here, and I appreciate your support with this. I have a couple of quick questions of the project's representatives that I can ask in any order, and you can feel free to address them one by one, if that's okay?
Yeah.
All right, cool. And so if you don't mind coming up here, we'll pepper you with a couple of our own questions, and folks have been texting me and grabbing me on my pit stops and asking me to ask things, so I've included them as well. So our next public meeting on this affair is going to be Saturday, October the 14th at Bowie State then, right? Okay. And at that point, we're going to have a sense of the preliminary alternatives with fewer alignments and maps with more detail at that stage? Right. That's what it sounds like? Okay. After that, after the October public hearing process, we're looking at the alternatives report and the draft environmental impact statement. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, cool. So a couple things. Real quick off the bat, I think it was mentioned at some point that there was a private company contracted working on the EIS. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand?
That's correct. That's correct.
What was the name of that company again? I'm so sorry.
ACOM.
ACOM?
It was on the slide.
Okay, and it's on the slide, and we can look them up?
The NEPA part of the process.
Cool. All right, cool. Someone asked about that, so I wanted to throw that in.
And they're contractor for MDOT.
Perfect. So one of the things I think we're all trying to understand at this stage, have any formal decisions on this project been made whatsoever? Because we hear slightly different things from different actors and different groups in this project. Have any decisions been made whatsoever?
I can answer that. The answer is no.
Okay.
This is a study, okay, that we're following the federal process to conduct this type of study.
Okay. All right, that's the first
Study
part.
for a private sector project. The state's not planning to spend any money on this project.
Perfect, okay. Can you give us a clear sense of when decisions are going to start being made on this project? By any of the actors necessary for this project to move forward?
Well, no, go ahead.
Sure. So following the October meetings, there will be another round of analysis done on the remaining alternatives. Those will be reduced further. And then in the draft environmental impact statement, we envision that there will be a recommendation as far as what potentially would be a preferred alignment. So that's the stage really where I think you were questioning.
Okay. Who officially is giving that recommendation, and who are the decision makers involved in that process?
Well, ultimately it's the Federal Railroad Administration's document. So they're the decision maker.
So they are the only decision maker in that process? Or they're the only formal decision maker ultimately?
Yes, the only formal decision maker.
Okay. How would you describe MDOT's role then? As purely influential or as essential for this process to move forward? In other words, can MDOT or anyone else on our board stop this thing on their own?
I'll answer that one. Again, we're a facilitator for the federal grant from FRA because you cannot give a grant like that to a private sector entity. Again, the state of Maryland is not going to build this project. This whole study is for a private sector entity if they were going to move ahead with this project. I'd also like to state for the record that I thank Mr. Mayor Robinson and the council member for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. It is always a good use of our time to hear our local politicians and our citizens. And I'm glad I was here tonight. Also, I would also state for the record that the letter from Secretary Ron to you, Mayor Robinson, states fairly clearly that the state will not be supportive of a project that would disrupt communities. And it states that fairly clearly and on the record. So there are still additional copies of the letter over here for any citizens that would like a copy of it. So thank you.
So while we're on the topic of taking our residents' homes, is it possible for the FRA to ignore the NEPA recommendation and just pick an alignment on their own?
Well, it wouldn't be good practice. I mean, there's a number of factors that go into that decision. So they're going to be following that process and weighing all the factors when making a decision. And there may be competing considerations and competing resources, but at the end of the day, they're tasked with making that decision considering all the factors.
Okay, let's pretend I'm looking for a yes or no answer because that happens to be the case. Can FRA disregard the recommendations of this process and pick an alignment on their own? In other words, are they bound by the recommendations that will come out of this process?
Well, I think the way that you're categorizing it is like that they're separate from the team. I mean, there's a group of folks doing the analysis. They're part of the project team. Ultimately, it's their decision, but they're going along with the team and with the study along the way. So I think you kind of framed the question that they wouldn't be involved throughout the process or would somehow be a little bit more removed than they are.
Well, given that they're the final decision maker, what I want to make sure of is that as this process moves forward and as we get a better sense of what the alignments are looked at, that, we're not going to get blindsided by the FRA changing their mind or like a decision being made that kind of contradicts what we've seen so far and what we'll continue to see as this process emerges. But it sounds like you're saying FRA is going to be a part of this all the way through and that they're not going to surprise us, that, if this moves forward and if this project does come to fruition, that it will be an alignment that we have discussed well in advance and that we know about. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, this is a iterative process and information is shared throughout that process. So, yes.
Okay. Along those lines, I mean, what is our minimum maximum time frame right now for when this thing might actually conceivably get built?
Well, we can't really speak about a construction schedule when we don't have an alignment identified. We need to get through this process first, this planning study, and then there's other steps that need to occur before you could even get to construction, permits and other approvals, funding. So it's difficult to speculate when exactly construction would begin when we haven't even gone through this planning process and identified what would be moving into construction.
A few months ago, a representative from BWRR told us that this thing could effectively start being built as early as 2019. We've heard from others in the state that this thing, if it does happen, would be 20 years away. So are you able to give us a better sense sometime between 2019 and 2039?
No, like I said, I'm not in charge of constructing the project, so I can't give you a construction schedule other than to say that we need to go through this process and a build alternative needs to be approved before we would even get into that phase of the project.
I'd really like to know if I can schedule a bike trip sometime between 2019 and 2039. So if you guys could get to us in writing a better estimate of a time frame, I think that would make all of us sleep a little better.
Sure.
And I don't mean to be flippant, but we're all a little tired.
I think what Brad's getting at is his answers that even if you got through the process, funding, there's no guarantee that there'll be funding to build it. So there's lots of projects in Maryland where they've planned it and studied it and it doesn't get built for 30 or 40 years. It just, you can't predict that. So the answer you're going to get from us will be similar to what Brad just told you. There's a lot of uncertainty there.
Okay. Well, hopefully some of this uncertainty will fade away, and I'm almost done, Mr. Mayor.
What there isn't any uncertainty for, though, is that what Secretary Ron has said in his letter representing the Hogan administration, that we will not be supportive of a project that's disruptive to communities.
Okay.
So.
And I appreciate that statement.
Yes.
Oh, one last quick thing. Does, or will MDOT itself have any influence whatsoever over the NEPA study and the alignment selection?
Well, MDOT MTA is an agency of the Maryland Department of Transportation. So the answer to that is straightforward. MDOT is part of the process, but only related to the NEPA part of the study, not involved in the construction of a project like this whatsoever, if that was to come to pass.
So what you're saying is MDOT does have influence over the NEPA study?
MDOT is conducting the NEPA, is overseeing the NEPA study like we do for many other transit projects or potential transit projects.
Has there been any communication between MDOT and BWRR as it pertains to the NEPA process or the alignment selection?
I've not been
Well, I
involved
mean,
with that.
there's communications on a routine basis just because they're part of the project team.
Is any of that communication available for public review?
I guess it would depend on what specifically the communication was.
I think we want a sense of the influence that BWRR has in the selection process, and we want a sense of the political influence that might ultimately determine an alignment that's chosen. And so to that effect, we're interested in any communication that MDOT might be having with BWRR, with the governor, with the governor's office, and with the governor's representatives as it pertains specifically to NEPA and to the alignment selection. So we'd be very interested in that.
We wouldn't have to be transparent in all of that.
I'm sorry?
There's no reason that we would not be transparent as all of that. We're conducting the study as we do any other federal study.
Okay. So then we'll have no issue getting any and all public input or any and all communication that's had then. We'll have no issue getting that if we need it.
I mean, anybody can make a PIA request for any state documents.
All right. Sounds like
That's
some will
part
be
of the law.
forthcoming. All right. That's pretty much all that I have for the moment. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate the statement that you've offered us, and I appreciate the answers to your questions. Like I said, we are going to be very interested in, the influencers and the decision makers, and getting a better sense of the time frame moving forward. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I won't take a lot of time. I'm just a little curious about, because we talk about this being a study, and as Senator Benson mentioned, 495 in Glen Arden was a study, and it just separated that community, and so of course we don't want that to happen. But are there other studies in other cities from DC to New York? Because all the signs and the PowerPoint said you'd like to go to New York with it. So have there been other studies? Is other cities trying to, are you trying to convince them to buy into this too? Or is it just going to stop at BWI?
So the study that the state is involved in is looking at just the Baltimore to Washington DC segment.
You don't know if there's any other states that are involved in a study?
We have not been involved in that whatsoever.
Not Maryland. You don't know whether Pennsylvania is involved or?
Not in a federal NEPA study.
Okay, all right. And you said you had a website, but people usually sign up to be a person of interest so they can get emails and things. Is there a way they can sign up for that? And is there a benefit to it, to get the email directly from you with all the updates, or is it quicker to go online?
There is a project mailing list that folks can sign up for on the website.
Ah.
And
I signed up in July, I haven't got one email. Zero.
It's not our website, that's the BWR website.
All right, well, and my last question, well, they're not really questions, they're my last two sort of statements. Be sure when you're in your study that the people know that Bowie University, with their train tracks right there, is a historically black university. And I'm really, really concerned about the magnetic field. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Dr.
You're welcome.
Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Lewis, for being here. I do have several questions. I'm looking at one of the slides that you had, and it's talking about who's involved. And it has federal agency, railroad, FRA, you guys, MDOT, MTA, and it has BWRR. I'm really curious about BWRR because I thought I heard you say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the process, you mentioned those entities and you said that you're supposed to be arm's length, I heard that, and you said it's an independent process. So did I hear you correctly?
BWRR is the private sector entity that is interested in the potential of building the SC maglev. So again, as I stated earlier, the FRA, as has been discussed earlier this evening, put out grant dollars, okay? But those grant dollars, a study, cannot be given directly to a private entity. So MDOT serves in the role as a receiver of the grant, okay? We do the federally required NEPA study, but any design and engineering related to the study planning process is done by BWRR.
Okay, so that's what BWRR
Yes.
does. Okay, great. Can they lobby?
Can BWRR lobby?
Yeah, can they lobby?
I'm not involved in any processes related to that.
Not that you're involved in it, but from your standpoint as being a Maryland official from MDOT, and you're on the organizational chart, you're at a higher level than they are. So I would think that you know something about. Oh, my question is very simple.
Any lobbying, if they
lobby?
did lobby, it would be independent of anything that the state would be involved in.
Okay, so they can lobby, they cannot, I don't understand the question. I don't understand the answer. Can they lobby, yes or no? Are you aware that they're lobbying?
Am I aware they're lobbying?
Yes.
I've heard they talk to people, but I don't know who.
Okay, does that bring, if I was to tell you if I was to tell you
Yes.
that two former council members from two different municipalities, of the 27 municipalities in Prince George's County, who I mentored when I was the president of the Prince George's County Municipal Association, came to me to ask me what I thought about maglev, because they were being asked to lobby the people who were legislators in the 27 in the Prince George's County Municipal Association, specifically the 11 of the 27 municipalities that are being involved.
All I can say to that is that the state has no involvement in any construction related to maglev. We are just facilitating the study process, period. So anything that they would be doing would be independent of the state.
Okay, so in other words, they can go ahead and do it. It seems like since they're independent, they would not be able to lobby elected officials of the Prince George's County delegation.
They're a private sector entity, so I think the question you would have to ask about any lobbying practices would be to the FRA. Does the FRA allow that? And I don't.
Yeah, we can't get the FRA here.
We're here.
Okay.
Okay, so we're being transparent, okay?
Well,
And one of the reasons for the letter is to make it clear that we are listening, okay? So if I know there were comments earlier, questioning whether anybody's listening. The fact that we're here, and we will be at your meeting too on Thursday, you're welcome, is that we are listening, and the Hogan administration is listening.
Okay. My understanding is that the grant requires that the total societary benefits exceed the societary cost. The total socio-economic environmental impacts coming through Bowie and other municipalities and the 11 that were mentioned, that were identified, are enormous. There are zero benefits that I see to any of those 11 municipalities. One, none of the routes are in any of those 11 municipalities. And I think Senator Benson said this, and it makes real good sense. It doesn't do me any benefit if I have to go to Washington, D.C. to get on maglev to go to Baltimore. I might as well just drive to Baltimore. It's quicker for me to do that. And
I think part of the reason for it being a study, and part of the rationale for doing studies that the federal government funds to determine if there is merit to the project.
Okay.
So that should come out as part of the study.
Okay. Is the no-bill alternative a real possibility, or will congressional intent to construct maglev require that the system be built somewhere even in Bowie?
As far as the state is concerned, the no-go alternative is one of the alternatives.
Okay. My colleague from District 1, Councilman Ested, he asked a question about the final decision maker. I'm just going to be very blunt, because you referred to the letter that was sent by the Secretary of Transportation, I believe it is. So does the governor have the final responsibility to say yes or no on this project?
Does the governor?
Yeah.
I think, as Brad talked about, the way these processes work, just like for any other project, there's a number of entities that are involved in the decision process. But I would also say if the governor's not happy with the project, it won't happen.
Okay, so if the governor doesn't want it, then it won't come through, just come through Maryland. That's your answer. Okay.
I just answered it. And the letter makes it clear also.
Okay. What will compel a no bill? What would compel a no bill from Maryland?
I can't presuppose the answer of a study that's still underway. That would just be speculation, and in my role, I can't really do that.
Okay. Let me just give you fruit for thought.
We're listening.
Notices. Okay. I heard that you said that you sent out emails. Let me just state, when you send out an email and you tell people to get on the website, you're automatically, for the most part, eliminating senior citizens. We've gone through this process, this communication process in the city of Bowie this year. If you really want to reach the people and you want to have more then 18 people arrive at your meeting, like we have here tonight. We have more than 18 people. We probably got about 300 like we had the last time. That's because we're using different forms of media. We're using the social media. We're also putting notices where seniors visit, senior centers, post office. I didn't hear any of those things mentioned by you guys as far as what you're doing. So if you send out a sample to the wrong population, then you obviously can't get the benefit of the sample size that you're really looking for, because you're not addressing the total sample size that you want to get.
Can you speak to the FRA's process?
Yeah, I'd just say, if you have specific suggestions moving forward, I'd be happy to.
Oh, I have specific suggestions.
Yes.
Matter of fact, you can get together with our city manager, because we have already started putting this together in the city of Bowie. You give me your email, I will email you what I sent to the city manager and what we're starting to implement in the city of Bowie.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Because you can't, you just can't say that you're going to do it on the website and expect people to come here. You've automatically eliminated all people. My mother who's involved, who could be involved in this. She lives in District 2. You've eliminated a whole lot of people. So even though you think you did a good job of putting it out on the website and asking people to come to the website in order to look up various things, you're not talking to everybody that's involved. You're not talking to a substantial amount of people that's involved. Really, you're talking to millennials and people who are just above the millennial age. You're not talking to the entire population that's involved. You're really not. I do have some more, but I will let it go, and I will be interested in. I would like for you. I was going to look it up, but I would like for you to get back with me on the question. Could you get back with me on Senate Bill 508 and let me know? Are you in compliance with Senate Bill 508? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Marcos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. I'll keep it short because I know we're running late. I definitely want to thank all of our citizens, all the ones that contacted me, and all the ones that took your valuable time to come here and fight this tonight. I don't think there's any question we're all unified on this front, so I think we can get that point across and hopefully stop this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank all the constituents that have come out. Thank you again. This is the second time that we've had. It has to be more than 300. If it was 300 last time, we have to be at about 450 or something. So it's great to see you all so engaged in our community. I also wanted to do a quick thank you to our elected officials that took the time out, especially Senator Benson, because this isn't even your district, but you've stayed to the very end. Also Senator Peters, of course, Delegate Holmes, Delegate Valentino Smith, Chairman Valerio, and Councilmember Todd Turner. So I have a couple of questions, and they piggyback off of some of what my colleagues have asked. So we've asked it in a variety of ways. I don't know that we have received a direct answer. Can this project take place without our support? Without the city of Bowie, without the state of Maryland, without even our federal representatives? Can the FRA still have this project take place over our opposition?
Well, I would say, it's not guaranteed that there's even an alignment that would come through Bowie. So in that respect, it could move forward regardless of any kind of position that Bowie takes. It would be more difficult moving forward if there was a change in support at the state or the federal elected official level.
Okay.
This is not, this is not like a FERC type of rulemaking. It's unlikely that a project like this can move forward without political support.
But it could, couldn't it?
Highly unlikely.
But it could.
I'm going to stick with highly unlikely.
Okay. And how does eminent domain play into that?
Without political support from the state, local level, projects like, federal level,
And
projects
how-
like this don't move forward.
How would eminent domain play into that?
We're not anywhere near that part of the process where we are even looking at the details of that. They're studying potential alignments, and some of those alignments are going to be dropped out within the next few weeks.
Right, but 4 of them will still be there, and they'll still be in play. And from my understanding, there is a chance that whether it's in Bowie or whether it's in other parts of the county or in Anne Arundel County, you could be taking away individuals' homes, businesses. And it's not that far-fetched if you look at the purple line and the homes and businesses that were taken out as they're beginning to construct that.
I'm not here to talk about the purple line.
I'm not asking,
That's a whole another
I'm not
project.
asking you to talk about the purple line, but I am
that's-
saying that eminent domain played a part in that. So if this was, if the FRA was to approve this,
Yes.
even over our opposition,
Like I said, it's highly unlikely. The purple line had federal, state, county, and overwhelming local support. So if this project cannot get some type of support, it's unlikely that it would move forward.
okay, do we have a buy-in? Do we have an MOU? Do we have anything from New York City or Philadelphia or DC?
We are not involved in that part of the process at all for Philly or New York.
You all don't have
We're
counterparts?
just involved with the FRA process to study the potential between Baltimore and Washington.
You don't have counterparts in those states, jurisdictions, what have you?
Not that I don't know what they're doing
That you have communicated
there.
with?
I can't answer your question because I don't know what they're doing there.
So potentially, this would just go from Washington DC to Baltimore.
From a state of Maryland perspective, we are just involved with the study from Washington DC to Baltimore.
Why would anybody that would be impacted by this construction, why would anybody in this area, in this city, and in this district, in this legislative area, why would anybody be for this when it takes 20 minutes to get to downtown DC and it takes about 25, 30 minutes to get to Baltimore?
That's what the study is for.
I don't, but there's no benefit for us. So.
And if we go through.
Can you come up, is there any idea of a benefit for us?
The study will show that in terms of the process that the FRA requires.
All right, moving on. Obviously, the meetings that happened in December, and I'm guessing April, were not well advertised, were not well attended. The fact that you only had 18 attendees should have told you that we need to redo this meeting and increase our outreach to the citizens so that they know that the process is transparent, they know that you want to work with us, that you all are listening to our concerns. Just here, one of our constituents did say there were about 669 flyers went out. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think there's 669 people in my apartment complex. So that doesn't even begin to encompass the city of Bowie. And if I'm incorrect on that number, it still didn't get out to the masses that it needed to. And did it get out to the other legislative districts? Did it get out to Anne Arundel County? Because now a coalition has formed and we are working together. So we really need you all to be as informative, as transparent, and as present as possible. As Ms. Brown said, which I thought was a great idea, she said, I'll come to your living rooms, I'll come to your HOA meetings. That's the kind of outreach that we need from all the partners in this project. Moving forward, your webpage is out of date. It really needs to be updated. This maglev one is out of date, needs to be updated. Additionally, you have Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the maps were not to scale. So how much of the concern I hear is from citizens afraid of the path, afraid their homes are in the path of the route? When are you planning on sharing those maps that are a better, more accurate reflection of the potential routes?
Well, we'll have the more detailed mapping available in October.
Okay. Further, I want to make sure that those who take the time to make comments are sending them to the right person in the right place. Your website still indicates Mr. Trusler, but your letter today states Deputy Administrator Suhair Al-Khatib. Okay, forgive me for not being able to pronounce. What is the best method for our concerned citizens to voice their opinions to you all?
Whatever is most convenient for them. If they send a letter in to the address that's on the website, it'll get routed to the appropriate person. We'll make the update on the website, but I just want to clarify and reassure everyone that if a letter has gone in to any individual that's worked on the project at any point, it's going to get to the proper person.
Okay, and how much would one of these tickets cost to ride this train?
I don't know, that's not part of our role in the project.
And there's no cost estimate?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, and I'm almost there, Mayor. I know you want me to hurry up. I want to make sure you know Senate Bill 508 from the 2004 regular session. So when you answer Councilmember Trout's question, make sure you get the year right.
We can get a more formal response on that, but if it's the legislation that I'm thinking of, I believe that was rescinded.
Okay, well, please provide all of us that information.
Yeah, we'll respond to the question.
Okay, and then last but not least, this is to our constituents here and at home that are watching. You guys have done a phenomenal job of coming out, of showing your opposition of this, of supporting the council who is unanimously against this project. I know the Facebook page has 1,300 plus members. Please continue to talk to your neighbors, to your friends, to the business associates, what have you, so that we can continue to increase this, so that we're all getting the same information. And also, there would be a way for us to have more meetings with Ms. Brown and other representatives at the Citizens Against the Maglev meetings. Also, please sign up for the mailing list that is on your website, is on the website that they provided, just in case, because we want to make sure we're all getting all the information. And I mean, finally, it's our responsibility. You all reach out to us pretty often, and we need you all to reach out to the federal representatives. I know myself and council member staff both included the federal representatives' contact information on the Facebook page, but however, all of our information is on the City of Bowie's page, so if you need those contacts, please email one of us. We will get them to you. We really have to, as a city and as an area, lobby our federal representatives because they have the biggest impact on this. And finally, just want to say, and I'm speaking on behalf of the majority of Bowie, I believe, we don't want it. We oppose it. However, if we are going to continue with this process, my citizens, our citizens, want and deserve every opportunity to have their voices heard. To do so, our community needs transparency, better advertising of meetings, better information. I shouldn't get more information from my constituents than I do from the representatives, and this is the second time. And this is the second meeting that we've had where the residents can provide more information than you all. And more respect, please. This is our home, and we all choose to live here. Thank you.
I can assure you that we greatly respect you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Dr. Trout promises me he has one very small, brief, short question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question to both you, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Smith. Eminent domain, that seems to be a key concern here. Do you know if eminent domain has been given to all 6 of the sites? All 6 of the, there's 6 sites that we're talking about, 6 proposed sites. Has eminent domain been given to all of them or any of them?
Well, my understanding of the real estate process in eminent domain, it's not specific to a specific site. It's an authority that's given to an entity carrying out a particular project. So to answer the question, I don't know that eminent domain is tied to a specific site or alignment. It's a power afforded to the entity carrying out an action in certain cases.
And again, this is a study. We're nowhere near that part of the process, if it ever gets there, so.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I hear what you're saying. And that process is the Public Safety Commission? That's what you're talking about in the process? And for my information, and here again, this goes back to what Councilman Glass was saying, we're getting more information from our constituents than we are from you. Just to enlighten you, we hear that the WB&A Trail does have eminent domain already on it. That's my sources tell me. So I don't know why I'm not getting that from you.
Again, projects like this generally do not move forward if there's not support at federal, state, and local level.
Yeah, but I can't expect to get more information from the community than I can from those who are coming to testify before the council. That's just not right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
very
ma'am.
quickly, I'm sorry. In my day job, I'm an attorney and do government relations. You keep saying that if it doesn't have the support of local municipalities, county, state, what have you, federal, then it's not going to go through. I have worked in Annapolis for 11 years, despite the fact I look much younger than that. And I've seen things go through without the support of communities, without the support of the elected officials. So that soundbite, please stop using it.
I'm not using it as a soundbite. This governor listens to the citizens, and that's why we're here tonight. We'll stay here as long as you need us to be here, and we'll answer the questions as truthfully as possible and as transparently as possible. This is a study process. Again, it's obvious that there's not a lot of community support for it, and we're listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me see if I can just wrap up a couple of things.
Before you wrap up.
Okay. I surrender.
Aren't I a pain? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before you wrap up, before you close, I mean, everybody here has been thanked tonight for their work and their due diligence and everything. Everybody except for you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank you for your effective leadership. I don't think without you, we could not have got to this point, so thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Let me just see if I can wrap something up here, please. And thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. One of the great things about being a grandparent is you watch kids' shows sometimes. And one of them I watch with my grandson is called Why. I don't know where the name came from. I don't know anything about the show. But the question is profound. You know, why? You ask yourself, this is going to be a merit-based decision. I think you're going to get the impression from everybody you talked here, the answer, is this a merit-based decision, is going to be no. I think if you look at, can it be done, like somebody said, can it be done? Yes. I don't think it, we don't think it should be. But I will say this, let's kind of walk back here. Part of the problem is, and let me just say this clearly, I still have a bit of a problem with the fact that the Federal Railroad Association people have not participated in any of these discussions with us. I appreciate you guys being here, and I appreciate the private entity people being here. They were here last year, and they took a lot of flack. And you guys have taken some flack, but the federal people seem to disappear. And that troubles me a bit. Now, like I said, I did have over the last, well, let's go back, April and May when we first heard about this? When we first heard about this. Some people from the feds and the state came down and had a meeting, a public meeting. They brought their little placards and generated more questions than they answered. And unfortunately, some of the folks that came with that presentation were not sufficiently versed in the matter to have a serious conversation. That incident generated into the meeting we had in July, when we asked some of the state officials, whatever, to come in and walk us through the process of how we got from this idea to this process and where we were and what our options were. That meeting was pretty helpful. I thought it lit some light, put some light on things. And as a result of that meeting, we went back and we've met with the governor, we've met with our legislative team, we've met with our federal people, one of whom suggested to me that this process doesn't work unless the private entity gets $6 or $8 billion of additional federal funding, which I don't think is going to happen. But we've tried to put everything and trying to work together. We have one common objective here, and there may be a more polite and more elegant way to describe it. But our message is to kill this project. You know, it's a matter, I will tell you this, you know, I don't know how everybody else is, but I'm heartened by the improvement, or the position we've made. And I assume that Secretary Ron didn't send this letter without discussing it with the governor. So I'm assuming, I look at where we started to where we are. We now have our federal legislative team pretty much on board. We have our state legislative team on board. Our county legislative team is on board. So I think we're clearly speaking with one voice, and you're hearing that voice.
Yes, we are.
There's two meetings, you know, we've probably got as many people that you guys have had to talk to in the last year. But I just want to wrap this up with a couple of quick observations about this. A couple of important lines in it. Understand this project is solely in the study phase. No plans for constructions have been approved or even proposed at this station.
Correct.
I'm holding it to that. That's
You can
where
hold
we are.
that. You can hold me to that.
But the paragraph I'm most interested in, the one I read before. Please be confident and rest assured the governor and the entire administration are paying close attention to this process and will continue to stand firmly against any proposed routes that would harm local communities.
Correct.
That be us.
Correct.
Or affect the quality of life of the citizens along the proposed zipline. And this is an unambiguous statement.
Correct.
We simply will not allow that to happen. I am taking this as a commitment that you guys are going to stand with us.
That is a
Okay.
commitment that
We
we
hope-
will obey those principles laid out in that letter.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. I think what you've seen us try to do, you know, we have a simple system. We just try to put everybody in a room together, lock the doors and say, you can't come out until you have a better idea. And that's what we're going to do with you guys at some point. We're going to lock you in a room and say, you can't come out until you come up with
Got us pretty locked in right now.
Nah, you're fine. Oh, these people are lovely. Wait till you see them get mad at you.
This morning at 8 o'clock, I was at the dentist getting some work done, and this is much more pleasant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
all right. All I wanted to say is, I want to say this directly to people at home and people here. I think we're making some significant, remember where we started from, kind of like a broadside, nobody expected, because maglev has come and gone several times in the past. You know, that should be an indicator of the future. It's nice to be intoxicated by technology and what we can do, but it's, you know, it's like these, what I think are silly driverless cars. I mean, are we getting that lazy? We can't drive our own car. But I say, given where we started, and now the people who have come together, and you've heard a broad swath of the city. I mean, the challenge is real. If this thing were to go anywhere, I mean, it would destroy this city. It would cut us in pieces. And, you know, I think the message you gotta hear, that's over our dead body.
Yeah.
But I'm pleased that we're starting to make some movement, and I think people are starting to come together, and I really hope, you know, the state is taking this seriously. I know our legislative body, our team is taking it seriously, and you know damn well those people are taking it seriously. But I want to keep thinking, we've got to keep our eye on the objective, and the objective is to do the program, or end the program. My sense is the path that we've taken of trying to work persuasion, to try to bring people to come to our point of view. If that doesn't work, then we'll go the litigation route, we'll go whatever route we have to. And like I say, according to this letter, we have a new ally. So our list of allies has expanded. I just don't want you to leave here with any sense that there's a compromise available with this, that there's a nuance available with this, there's a mixed agreement that could be available with this. You know, like the Senator said, I don't remember saying I want to drive a stake through the heart of this, but if he said I said that, good for him. We all understand why people want to do different things, and believe me, we don't hold you at fault for doing your jobs and trying to, you know, bring this thing. I just want to make sure that when you go back here, the message goes back to the Secretary. We appreciate his involvement, and we appreciate the governor's involvement. We appreciate all these people that are going to, because we're not going to go away. We're kind of hard-headed here. But it is what it is. This is one of those ideas that ought to go back in a cubby hole somewhere and come out again in 40 or 50 years. Because by the time if this thing were to get started today, by the time it got done, it would be obsolete. Because we're going to be, you know, I'm waiting for Scotty to beam me from place to place. Yeah. Anyway, but let me again, from Beth Alls, thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you all the other state officials, and thank you all for this. I mean, this is what's real critical. When we go down and speak to these officials, it's good for them to know that we're speaking for pretty much a unanimous consensus in the community. So we've got to stay involved, stay vigilant, stay involved. The city has established a whole separate page on the website that's simply devoted to this. If you get information, channel it to us, channel it through the city manager's office, and we'll get it integrated with that. Because we have one goal here, and we're all on the same page, and I've talked too much already. So with
We've
that.
heard.
Huh?
We've heard you loud and clear.
Okay, well, as long as we're on the same page. All right, well, thank you very much for your coming. And if you guys want to, I assume you want to rush out of here and go home and watch the 11 o'clock news, because you're 20 minutes late for that. But we still have a lot of work to do for this, for agenda. So if you would quietly exit the room, or you can stay here for the rest of it if you have trouble sleeping. All right. All right, guys, item next, the city transportation draft letters. I'll tell you what, why don't we take 5-minute break? Take 5 minutes. 5-minute recess. Good to see you, bud. Thank you. Like I say, I always admire a man that brings his daughter out on events like this. This is a cheap date for you, Calvis. Yeah. Did you tell your wife you were taking her out tonight? Is that what this is all about? This is your night out? Huh? Back up here. I appreciate it. I know you have more conversations, but if you could take them to the lobby, we still have more work to do.
I thought it's over.
No, that item is over. We got 4 more to do. So if you guys would take your conversations into the lobby, I'd appreciate it. All right, guys, the item next on is city transportation priority. Mr. City Manager or Mr. Planning Director?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. For the record, Joe Meinert, Planning Director, and I'm here this evening to request Council's approval to send the draft transportation priority list letters to our state and county officials. Each year,
Oh, come on. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Each year, the council sends a letter to the state transportation secretary outlining the priorities for state roads, and then we send a letter to the county executive indicating your priorities for county road facilities. And so we prepared 2 draft letters to the respective individuals that I mentioned, dated September 6th, and we would request council approval to send these letters. Thank you.
Anybody sign up to speak? Thank you. Dustin, again. Mr. Kuzan, welcome again, sir. I saw your note in here, by the
Cleared
way.
out the room for you. All right, I submitted a letter to you guys. Hello, Mayor, Council. How are you doing tonight? I'm going to make it short because I know you guys want to go to sleep. So the letter, I'll leave you guys to read it tonight before you go to sleep. I just want to point out, there's myself and a couple citizens, about 7 other citizens signed at the bottom of the letter, have discussed the transportation priorities list pertaining, the list that Joe gave a presentation on at the last council meeting. And we'd like to support 4 of the top priority trail projects, including the pedestrian underpass under Maryland 197 by Bowie State University, the sidewalk retrofit construction on Old Laurel Bowie Road, the trail link between Dolphin Way and Woodmore Estates and Dunwood Crossing Drive in Woodland Highlands, and a new pedestrian bridge over Maryland 214, and just moving those forward this fiscal year. The other thing we had some discussion on were 2 of the city's priority transportation projects, Maryland 197 and Maryland 450, and we have concerns on the current designs of those projects. And we're not advocating to stop advancing those projects forward, but we're asking if we could open a dialogue with the state to talk about the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure currently planned and designed for those projects. Maryland 197, the main concern is the current position of the side path that they're looking at putting in place of the existing trail that runs along Maryland 197, and is going from a really nice trail with a scenic kind of tree line buffer and along the lake there. I don't know if you guys ever went back there, but and they're looking at moving that right against the roadway between the road and the noise wall. And it's going to end up collecting a lot of debris. It's going to end up being a very loud path. I think it's going to significantly degrade the quality of the existing side path, and that's kind of what we want to work against. So if there's any opportunity to open that discussion up, I think that project is currently only at 30% design, so there should be plenty of time and opportunity to discuss that with the state. The other project, Maryland 450, is our Main Street corridor, And I don't know if you've been out there lately and observed the pedestrian patterns since Marketplace was built, but there's at least one crossing there at the Marketplace between Superior Lane and the next street down, where you'll see a bunch of pedestrians crossing. One of our new members of a group that, I'd like to say this does not represent that group, but the committee on walking and bicycling, one of our newer members has a neighbor where their son was hit there on a bicycle. I think we're only going to see more pedestrian crashes in that location because there's very risky behavior going on with people walking between Marketplace and the shopping center with the giant there, Free State. And we're looking at possibly, we'd like to advocate to put additional crossing there, and then the other up the road at Scarlet Oak Terrace, where you also find people crossing there between the community there, which I live in, but Bowie Forest and then by the Outback there. So those, we believe that will give more crossing opportunities, allow people to cross back and forth between residents and the shopping centers and create more of a downtown Main Street feel. And that is at 90% design, I believe, so it's a little later, but I do think that by the time it gets funded for construction and moves forward, that we still have a little bit of time that we can look at improvements for signals and all.
Points well taken.
What's that?
Well taken.
Oh, thank you. And that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
If nobody else is signed up to speak at the end of the public hearing, anybody have any questions of staff?
Yeah, just real quick, and I'll be real fast. Mr. Meinert, when you get a chance, I don't know if you've been privy to the documents that Mr. Kazan presented us tonight. Have you seen those yet?
No, sir, I've not seen them,
Okay.
but we have discussed some of these concerns previously.
Perfect. Dustin, if you wouldn't mind sharing those with Mr. Meinert when you get a chance, that'd be a good opportunity for conversation. And in particular, I've heard a lot from constituents about the issues around Marketplace. When we're done having a discussion with the proprietors, the Bowen, about the management of that particular facility, we might also want to take up with them potentially looking at traffic patterns around Marketplace, because we're hearing a lot of concerns about the ways that cars are coming in and out of the new development there, that might be a little bit problematic. So I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Any other questions? You have a recommendation to approve the motion?
So moved.
And second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, CAPER.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is George Jones. I am the Grants Manager for the City of Bowie, and tonight I'm here to present to you the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for fiscal year 17. As you all might be aware, the City of Bowie is an entitlement community with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we receive the Community Development Block Grant funding each year. And as such, certain reporting is required to remain eligible with this program. Two of the main reports that we do yearly with this funding is the Annual Action Plan, which we last filed in June, and that's a report that outlines what we're going to do with the funding, the Community Development Block Grant funding. And then there's what I'm presenting tonight is the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, which identifies what we actually did with the funding, how we met it, and other requirements of the funding that are required. In fiscal year 17, which is the year we're talking about and just completed, we received $162,514 in funding under the Community Development Block Grant. The CAPER report covers approximately 6 main areas. Those areas are affordable housing, fair housing, homelessness, non-housing community development, special needs population, and other special projects. And I won't read the entire report to you, I'll just summarize it at this time. Our main focus with the block grant funding was the Senior Citizen Green Housing Rehabilitation Program. Under that program, we provide senior citizen homeowners in the city of Bowie rehab repairs, including things like roofs, windows, doors, air conditioning and heating upgrades, and appliances. In addition to that, we also provide each homeowner with an energy audit. They can use that audit so that they can make informed decisions about how their house is performing and the best ways to use the funding. In addition, we do a pre-construction inspection, which basically identifies the work that's going to be done in the home, and also we perform lead testing when it's needed. In addition to that, we do fair housing training for staff, realtors, HOAs, and others on an annual basis. We also work within the affordable housing arena. We represent, my boss, Jesse Buggs, is the chair of the housing directors for the Regional Council of Governments. We also work in homelessness. We serve on the Prince George's County Homeless Services Partnership. We participate in the point-in-time survey or point-in-time account of homeless persons in the city of Bowie, and we provide assistance as needed to homeless persons identified in Bowie. We take part in the regional team that seeks out and assists homeless persons from, I think it's from Bowie all the way up to Laurel, Maryland. And that's done on an annual basis as well. And also we work with the police department, businesses, senior center, health center, the Bowie Pantry, and in assisting homeless persons that are identified through those agencies. We also, in the basement of City Hall here, we maintain a small pantry of non-perishable food items, clothing items, and other essential items that may be that can be used by the homeless persons. All these items and others are detailed in the report you have, and at this time, we recommend that you approve the resolution before you, indicating that we have successfully completed the HUD CDBG requirements for fiscal year 17.
Okay. Anybody sign up, speak?
No, sir.
I declare a public hearing has been concluded. Questions of staff? Mrs. Blanken?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Geez, I didn't know I was on before. I hope I didn't say anything stupid. With the block grants you get and the various different ways you get funding and spend it on the homeless and things like that, if someone in the city is having difficulties making their mortgage and they may lose their house, is there any assistance from the city that can help them through one of those grants?
At this time, we cannot use the block grant funding to assist people with mortgage payments. We try to get to them early. We ask to try to identify them early. There are programs that the state has that we try to connect them with that might be able to help them, but with this funding, no, we cannot provide.
Could you, after the meeting, or you may want to go home before we get home, write them down for me so I'll have them, so when some of my constituents call me about it, I can have that information readily available?
Yes, I can.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Steph?
Very, very quickly. If we encounter a person who's experiencing homelessness in the city, who's the best person or what's the best agency to send them to?
Prince George's County has a 311 number.
Okay.
And they can connect them with shelter and services. There's an intake process that they have to go through.
What is it, CSI is the acronym? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. That is
Perfect.
Yes.
And they can get there through the 311 number?
Yes, yes, they
Okay,
can.
cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And please convey to Mr. Buggs that I think all of us really appreciate the work he continues to do, and you as well. Thank you for joining us late tonight.
Thank you, I will.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. Oh,
Make a
sorry.
motion to adopt their,
Second.
what's the, R47, one of you want to make a motion to adopt?
I will make that motion,
All
Mr.
right,
Mayor.
move to adopt. Mrs. Flanagan, you seconded. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Item last week I sent you guys an email about a potential financial engagement with our friends in Texas. And in that, we listed all the previous times, and we have tried to help, with Katrina and others, other things. What I was going to suggest to you for consideration is we make a one-time contribution, to the Red Cross to deliver services down there for about, you don't like the Red Cross?
No. No.
Okay.
As soon as I got your email, I emailed our emergency manager.
Okay.
And I have the contact information of where our emergency manager recommends. It just so happens I had a conversation with my wife last week, and I was telling her, I said,
We're talking about sending money to an emergency management association?
no, it goes right directly to the city of Houston. I have the link. He sent me the link.
Oh, okay.
He sent me the link. Because the Red Cross, I told my wife that the Red Cross has an administrative fee of 20%.
Okay. All right, well,
No sooner than
I'm
sooner than I got that out of my mouth, it's 25 point something percent.
Okay, all right. My first question is, are you willing to consider that?
Absolutely.
If you want to send it to Houston, Houston City, that's fine, but, like I say, there's some other cities down there too.
Right.
Good, so,
Yeah, but I think there's a central fund you can send it to that will take care of all, and our.
how about let's do this, if you guys are willing to make a consensus agreement that, you're okay with the money, we'll look at a couple of unlikely people who send it. I just have a little concern sending it to one city when all the others are down there. So if there's another alternative, and before we do anything, I'll send back for you guys to, agree to the site. And okay? Everybody agree with that? Yes. Okay. You're on.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn to a closed session. Statutory authority to closed session, general provisions, Article 3-305, subsection B, subsection 14, before a contract is awarded or bid are open to discuss a matter directly related to a negotiating strategy or the comments of a bid or proposal if public discussion or disclosure would adversely impact the ability of the public body to participate in a cooperative bidding and proposal process.
I didn't hear that. Can you read it again?
Sure, not a problem.
You second that, did you? Second by Ms. Glass. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Negative? All right, unanimous. We'll go to executive session in the chamber.